She doesn't belong at this table. She belongs in the basement where I found her. Those words stopped Ethan Cole's heart. The billionaire tech mogul had come home early from Singapore, jet-lagged and exhausted, only to hear his wife's voice dripping with venom through the kitchen doorway. But it wasn't the cruelty that made his blood run cold. It was the target. The elderly black woman being degraded in his own home was Lena Brooks, the woman who had saved his life 30 years ago. The woman who'd given him everything when he had nothing. The woman he'd promised to protect forever. What Ethan discovered in the next 72 hours would destroy his marriage, expose a conspiracy among the ultra-wealthy, and force him to choose between the life he'd built and the woman who'd made it possible. I invite you to follow my story to the very end. Please like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. The marble floors of the Cole mansion gleamed under the evening sun as Ethan's town car pulled through the iron gates. He rubbed his eyes, fighting the disorientation that came with crossing 12 time zones in 14 hours. The Singapore deal had closed faster than expected, 3 days compressed into 36 hours of negotiations. His executive team wouldn't arrive back in San Francisco for another 2 days. Good. He needed the quiet. The house looked pristine as always, a monument to Vanessa's obsessive aesthetic standards. Every hedge trimmed to geometric precision, every window spotless, every stone in the circular driveway aligned like soldiers. It had taken his wife 3 years and $7 million to transform the historic Pacific Heights estate into her vision of perfection. Ethan had signed the checks without argument. Making Vanessa happy seemed like a small price for domestic peace. He'd been wrong about that. Mr. Cole, welcome home. James, their day butler, opened the door with practiced efficiency. We weren't expecting you until Thursday. Change of plans. Ethan handed over his briefcase and carry-on. Is Mrs. Cole home? In the conservatory, sir. She's hosting her book club. James hesitated, something flickering across his professionally neutral expression. Shall I announce you? No need. I'll surprise her after I clean up. Ethan moved toward the grand staircase, then paused. Is everything all right, James? Of course, sir. The answer came too quickly. Will you be dining at home this evening? Probably just something light. I'm still on Asia time. Ethan studied the butler's face, sensing unease beneath the polished surface. You're sure everything's fine? Absolutely, sir. James straightened his already perfect posture. I'll inform the kitchen staff of your arrival. Ethan watched him retreat down the hallway, frowning. In 5 years of employment, James had never seemed uncomfortable before. The man had served ambassadors and tech moguls with unflappable grace. What could possibly rattle him? The answer hit Ethan before he'd climbed 3 steps. She doesn't belong at this table. She belongs in the basement where I found her. Vanessa's voice carried from the kitchen, clear and cutting despite the distance. Ethan froze, one hand on the banister. His wife's book club usually met in the conservatory or the formal living room. Why were they in the kitchen? Vanessa, darling, isn't that a bit harsh? Another voice. Margaret Chen, probably. The venture capitalist's wife always played the diplomatic moderator. Harsh? I'm being generous. Ice clinked in a glass. The woman showed up at my door 3 months ago with some ridiculous story about knowing Ethan as a child. She had nowhere to go, so I took pity on her. And this is how she repays my charity? Ethan's heart began to hammer against his ribs. 3 months ago. Lena had come here 3 months ago? What did she do? A third voice, younger, probably Sienna, what's her name, the new wife of that hedge fund manager. What didn't she do? Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. She acts like she owns the place, touching things, asking questions. Yesterday, I caught her looking through old photographs in Ethan's study. Can you imagine? The presumption of these people. These people. Ethan moved silently down the hall, blood roaring in his ears. He positioned himself behind a marble pillar where he could see into the kitchen without being seen. 6 women sat around the informal breakfast table, Vanessa's usual circle of tech wives and society climbers. Champagne glasses and cheese plates covered the distressed wood surface that had cost $30,000 because it looked authentically rustic. And standing at the sink, washing dishes with her back to the group, was Lena Brooks. 30 years hadn't erased her from Ethan's memory. Same proud posture despite the curve of age in her spine. Same careful movements, economical and efficient. She wore a simple gray dress that looked like it had seen too many washings, her steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her hands moved steadily through the soapy water, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. She was listening to every word. "I mean, where does she even sleep?" Sienna asked. "You don't have her in one of the guest suites, do you?" "God, no." Vanessa topped off her champagne. "There's a room in the basement near the mechanical systems. It's perfectly adequate for someone in her situation. Better than a shelter, certainly." Margaret shifted uncomfortably. "Vanessa, maybe we should—" "Should what? Pretend I'm running a charity hotel?" Vanessa's voice sharpened. "I've been more than accommodating. She has a roof over her head, food to eat. In exchange, she helps out around the house. It's a fair arrangement." "You're not paying her?" Margaret's tone held genuine surprise. "For what? She's family, supposedly." Vanessa's laugh was brittle. "Though, of course, Ethan hasn't confirmed any of her ridiculous claims. He's been traveling so much we haven't had a chance to discuss it, and I'm certainly not about to ask him to validate every sob story that shows up at our door." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Lena had come to his home, their home, looking for help, and Vanessa had turned her into unpaid domestic labor, hidden her away in the basement like something shameful. "She seems harmless enough," offered a woman Ethan didn't recognize. "And she's so quiet. I barely notice her." "That's the problem." Vanessa leaned forward conspiratorially. "It's not natural, the way she watches everything, like she's cataloging information. And some of the things she says—" She lowered her voice, forcing her audience to lean in. "I think there might be something wrong with her mentally. Confusion, paranoia. At her age, it's sadly common." Lena's hands stilled in the dishwater for just a moment, then resumed their steady rhythm. "Have you considered getting her evaluated?" Margaret asked carefully. "If she's showing signs of cognitive decline—" "Oh, I've already started that process." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "Very discreetly, of course. Dr. Pemberton has been wonderful. He's connected with several excellent facilities that specialize in elder care for people with limited resources." The room fell silent. Even these women, accustomed to Vanessa's casual cruelty, seemed to recognize they'd crossed into dangerous territory. "Facilities?" Margaret set down her glass. "Vanessa, you can't be serious." "Why not? I'm thinking of her welfare." Vanessa's tone turned defensive. "She clearly can't care for herself properly. She needs professional supervision, medical attention. These places provide that. And honestly, it's not like Ethan has any real obligation to her. Whatever relationship they supposedly had was decades ago. He was a child. People don't owe their entire lives to every random person who showed them kindness once." Ethan's vision blurred red around the edges. Random person. Random kindness. Lena Brooks had found him when he was 7 years old, living in his dead mother's apartment for 3 days, surviving on tap water and dry cereal because he didn't know who else to call. She was the building superintendent's wife, the woman who'd noticed the newspapers piling up outside Unit 4C and decided to investigate. She'd held him while he cried, fed him, sat with him through his mother's funeral. And when Child Protective Services couldn't find any relatives willing to take a traumatized mixed-race kid, Lena Brooks, a woman who could barely afford her own bills, had opened her home without hesitation. For 11 years, she'd been his mother in every way that mattered, worked 2 jobs to keep him fed and clothed, sat up with him through nightmares, helped him with homework she didn't fully understand herself, pushed him to dream bigger than the South Side of Chicago wanted him to dream. When he'd gotten into Stanford on full scholarship, she'd cried harder than he did. When he'd sold his first startup at 26 for $18 million, his first call had been to Lena. He'd bought her a house, set up a trust fund, made sure she'd never want for anything, or so he'd thought. "Where is she now, anyway?" Sienna glanced toward the doorway. "Did she go back to Chicago?" "Who knows?" Vanessa shrugged. "I lost track after the trust situation fell through." Ethan's chest tightened. Trust situation? The trust Ethan set up for her, it turned out there were complications, some kind of fraud investigation, mismanaged funds. Very messy. By the time it all got sorted out, there was barely anything left. Vanessa spoke with the casual authority of someone stating obvious facts. That's when she showed up here. Honestly, I think she squandered what Ethan gave her and came looking for more. Every word was a lie. Ethan managed the trust himself through his private wealth office. He received quarterly reports. The fund had grown from $2 million to nearly $4 million through conservative investments. There was no fraud, no investigation, no complications. Just steady, secure growth designed to ensure Lena never had to worry about money again. So why was she here? Why hadn't she touched the money? In any case, Vanessa continued, Dr. Pemberton thinks we can have her evaluated and placed within the month, before Ethan gets too attached or feels obligated. It's really the kindest thing for everyone. I should go check on the catering for Saturday. Margaret stood abruptly, clearly uncomfortable. The gala is going to be magnificent, Vanessa. Everyone's talking about it. The conversation shifted to safer ground, fundraisers, fashion, gossip. The women's voices faded into background noise as Ethan watched Lena finish the dishes, dry her hands on a threadbare towel, and slip quietly out of the room through the service entrance. He waited until the book club dissolved into air kisses and luxury SUV departures. Waited until he heard Vanessa's heels clicking toward the conservatory. Then he moved. The basement stairs were hidden behind a door near the service pantry, an architectural vestige from when homes like this relied on invisible armies of servants. The steps were bare wood, without the heated stone or plush carpeting found in the rest of the house. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Ethan descended slowly, his Italian leather shoes silent against the treads. The basement was exactly as he remembered from the home inspection 4 years ago. Exposed pipes, mechanical systems, storage for seasonal decorations, and the backup generators that California luxury demanded. And in the far corner, behind the wine cellar, a door he didn't remember. It stood half open. Through the gap, he could see a narrow room barely 8 feet square. A single bed with a thin mattress and threadbare blanket. A folding chair. A plastic bin that held what looked like all of Lena's worldly possessions. No heat vent, no windows, no private bathroom. The temperature down here had to be 15 degrees colder than upstairs. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, her back straight despite her obvious exhaustion. She was looking at something in her hands. A photograph, he realized. Even from the doorway, Ethan recognized it. His 7th grade graduation, Lena in her Sunday best, beaming with pride, one arm around a skinny kid with braces and hope in his eyes. "Hello, Ethan." She didn't look up. "I wondered when you'd find me." Her voice was exactly as he remembered, warm, steady, strong. But underneath, he heard something new. Weariness, resignation, the weight of months enduring humiliation in silence. "Lena." His voice cracked on her name. "What? How?" "Long time, baby." She finally looked at him, and the love in her eyes nearly broke him. "Look at you, still so handsome, still so worried about everyone else." Ethan stepped into the room, horror and rage warring in his chest. "Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you—" He gestured helplessly at the bare walls, the concrete floor, the single bulb hanging from a wire. "Jesus Christ, Lena, why are you living like this?" "I tried to call." She said it simply, without accusation. "About 4 months ago, maybe 5 now, I left messages with your assistant, sent emails, even wrote a letter to your office." "I never got any of it." Ethan pulled out his phone, already pulling up his communication logs. "I swear to you, I believe you." Lena folded the photograph carefully. "Your wife was very clear about that. She said you were too busy to be bothered with old history, that I should be grateful she was willing to help at all." "Help?" The word came out strangled. "She put you in the goddamn basement." "I've slept in worse places." Lena's smile was sad but genuine. "At least it's dry, and I get a meal most days as long as I'm useful." "Most days?" Ethan felt his carefully controlled world tilting on its axis. "Lena, the trust fund. You have millions. Why aren't you—" "What trust fund?" She looked confused. "Ethan, honey, I don't know what you're talking about. After Harold died—" Her voice caught slightly on her late husband's name. "After Harold passed 3 years ago, things got tight. The pension wasn't as much as we'd thought. Medical bills from his cancer ate through our savings. I managed for a while, but then the house needed a new roof and the property taxes went up and she stopped, shaking her head. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. You've done enough for me, more than enough, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. Ethan's mind raced. 3 years ago, Harold's death. That was when he'd increased the trust distribution to help Lena cover expenses. He'd spoken to her on the phone about it, made sure she knew how to access the funds. She'd been grateful, but insisted she didn't need charity, except she'd never accessed the account. Not once. Stay here, he commanded, already moving toward the stairs. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to figure this out. Ethan. Her voice stopped him at the door. Your wife, she's not a bad person. She's just, don't. He turned back, and whatever she saw in his face made her fall silent. Don't you dare defend her. Not after what I heard upstairs. Not after this. He gestured at the prison cell masquerading as a room. I just don't want you to do anything you'll regret. Lena stood, and despite everything, her concern was for him, always for him. You built a good life, a beautiful home. Don't let me be the reason you lose it. You're not the reason for anything. Ethan forced himself to breathe, to think. But I promise you this. By tomorrow, things are going to change, starting with getting you out of this basement. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his mind already assembling the pieces of a puzzle he should have seen months ago. Vanessa's increasingly frequent charity work, her sudden interest in elder law, the new doctor she'd been praising at dinner parties, Dr. Pemberton, and the communications he'd never received. Vanessa was in the conservatory, reclining on a velvet chaise with a fashion magazine. She looked up as he entered, her face arranging itself into an expression of pleased surprise. Darling, I didn't hear you come in. She rose, moving toward him with the grace of a woman who'd spent her youth on pageant stages. When did you get back? I thought you weren't due until… Where's Lena? He kept his voice level through sheer force of will. Vanessa's smile flickered. Lena? The elderly black woman living in our basement, the one washing dishes for your book club, the one you're planning to have institutionalized. He watched her face pale. Ring any bells? Ethan, I can explain. Did you intercept my messages? He pulled out his phone. 4 months of calls, emails, letters, all from Lena, all of which you told her I was too busy to deal with. I was protecting you. Vanessa's composure cracked. Some random woman shows up claiming to know you from 30 years ago, spinning stories about being your mother or whatever ridiculous… She didn't claim to be my mother. Ethan's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. She is my mother, in every way that matters. The only reason I'm standing here in this house, running a billion-dollar company, living this life, it's because Lena Brooks saved me when I was 7 years old and had nothing. Vanessa stared at him. You never mentioned… I mentioned her 100 times. The words came out hard and precise. Every time I talked about my childhood. Every time I explained why I support foster care reform. Every time I told you about the woman who raised me in Chicago. But you never listened, did you? Because she wasn't wealthy or connected or useful to your social climbing. That's not fair. Vanessa's shock was giving way to defensive anger. You have important work, significant responsibilities. I was managing our household, dealing with situations you didn't have time for. You put her in the basement. Ethan enunciated each word carefully. You worked her like a servant. You planned to have her declared incompetent and locked away. And you did it all while spending money from the fortune I built to impress people who don't give a damn about you. I was trying to help. Vanessa's voice rose. She was clearly confused, possibly dangerous. Dangerous? Ethan laughed without humor. Lena Brooks is 73 years old and weighs maybe 110 pounds. What exactly did you think she was going to do? Redistribute the silver? You don't understand. Vanessa wrapped her arms around herself. She was always watching, listening. The staff said she made them uncomfortable, and Dr. Pemberton agreed that her behavior showed signs of… Dr. Pemberton. Ethan pulled up his phone again, fingers flying over the screen. The psychiatrist you've been consulting, the one on the board of that private care facility in Moran, The one who, according to their website, specializes in expedited elder placement for families dealing with difficult situations. He looked up. How much were they paying you? Vanessa's face went white. What? Referral fees, finder's fees, however they structure it. Ethan's research team had taught him to follow money trails. These places charge 6 figures annually. They can afford to be generous with people who send them clients. That's disgusting. But Vanessa couldn't meet his eyes. I would never. You would. You did. Ethan pocketed his phone. And we're done. Done? Vanessa's voice turned shrill. Ethan, you can't be serious. Over some woman you haven't seen in decades? Someone who might not even be who she claims? I know exactly who she is. Ethan moved toward the door. And I know exactly who you are. Finally. If you walk out that door, if you choose her over me, Vanessa's voice took on a threatening edge. I'll make this very expensive for you. Divorce, publicity, whatever it takes. Your reputation, your business relationships, your precious tech world, I'll burn it all down. Ethan paused, looking back at the woman he'd married 6 years ago. Beautiful, polished, perfect. Everything he'd thought he wanted when he was building his empire and needed someone who looked right on his arm. He'd never seen how empty it all was. Do your worst, he said quietly. But Vanessa, before you start making threats, you might want to talk to your lawyer about wire fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation, because that's what this is, and unlike you, I have actual evidence. He left her standing in the conservatory, her face twisted with shock and rage. Let her call her lawyers, her friends, her society contacts. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was in the basement, sitting in the dark because she'd learned not to expect light. Ethan took the basement stairs faster this time, his heart pounding with purpose instead of horror. Lena was still sitting on the narrow bed, but she'd put the photograph away. She looked up as he entered, and he saw her trying to read his expression. Pack your things, he said. Everything. You're leaving. Ethan, I don't want to cause trouble between you, and the trouble already exists. You just helped me see it. He crouched in front of her, taking her weathered hands in his. They were rough from decades of work, scarred from years of sacrifice. I'm so sorry for not checking in more, for not knowing you needed help, for letting this happen under my own roof. Baby, you didn't know. She squeezed his hands. You've got a whole empire to run. You're just the most important person in my life. Ethan's voice was fierce. You saved me, Lena. You gave me everything. And I'm not going to let anyone, not Vanessa, not some corrupt doctor, not anyone, treat you like you're disposable. Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. Where am I supposed to go? Anywhere you want. Ethan helped her to her feet. But tonight, you're staying in the best guest suite this house has, with heat and a real bathroom and clean sheets and room service if you want it. Tomorrow we'll figure out what happened to the trust fund and why you never received the money. And then, he paused. Then you'll tell me what you need, what you want, and I'll make it happen. I don't need anything fancy. Lena wiped her eyes. I just wanted to see you again, to know you were okay, to tell you I was proud of you. I'm not okay. Ethan admitted it for the first time. I've been building this perfect life, and I didn't even notice it was built on lies. But I'm going to fix it, starting now. He led her up the basement stairs through the kitchen where she'd been humiliated hours before, past the conservatory where Vanessa had disappeared. The main staircase felt appropriate somehow. Lena Brooks deserved to walk through the front of the house like the honored guest she should have been all along. The blue guest suite occupied the entire east wing of the second floor. Ethan opened the door and watched Lena's face as she took in the king-sized bed, the sitting area, the massive windows overlooking the city lights, the marble bathroom with its heated floors and rainfall shower. This is too much, she whispered. It's not enough. Ethan squeezed her shoulder. But it's a start. I'm going to make some calls, get some answers. You rest. Order whatever you want from the kitchen. Take a bath. Sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow, we start fixing everything. Ethan. Lena caught his arm before he could leave. Your wife, she's going to fight this. I know. He smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. But she doesn't know what she's fighting. She thinks I'm just some tech billionaire who got lucky. She doesn't understand where I came from, what I had to survive to get here. What are you going to do? What you taught me. Ethan's voice was soft but certain. I'm going to be smart, be thorough, and be absolutely ruthless with people who hurt the ones I love. He left Lena in the suite and headed to his private office, the one room in the house Vanessa had never been allowed to redecorate. His sanctuary, with its standing desk and wall of monitors and encrypted servers that held everything that mattered. The trust fund was his first call. His private wealth manager, Diane Chen, answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Ethan, is everything all right? No, I need you to pull every transaction, every statement, every piece of communication related to the Lena Brooks Trust. Everything from the last 3 years. The Brooks Trust. Diane's confusion was audible. That account has been completely dormant since we set it up. There hasn't been a single withdrawal or pull everything anyway. And I need to know who has access to the account information, who would be able to see the statements, the balance, the contact information. A pause. Ethan, what's going on? Just get me the information, tonight if possible. I'll have it to you within the hour. His next call was to his head of security, Marcus Wade, former Secret Service, former Special Operations, and now the man who made sure Ethan's life and business stayed secure. Marcus, I need you to pull all security footage from the house for the last 4 months, every camera, every recording, and I need it on an encrypted drive that hasn't touched our home network. Sir, if there's a security concern, there is, but not the kind you're thinking. Ethan stared out at the San Francisco skyline, city lights spreading out like scattered diamonds. Just get me the footage. And Marcus, I'm going to need you to do some background on my wife. Another pause, longer this time. Are you sure? Very sure. Her communications, her finances, her associates, especially a doctor, Martin Pemberton, and anything connected to a facility called Serenity Heights Elder Care. Understood. When do you need this? Yesterday. I'll start tonight. Ethan's final call was to his lawyer, Kenneth Morrison, the man who'd structured every major deal Ethan had made in the last decade. Kenneth, I need you to prepare divorce papers, and I need you to do it quietly. Jesus, Ethan, I'm sorry. Kenneth's shock was genuine. Do you want to talk about? No. I want you to document everything I'm about to tell you, and then I want you to prepare a case that will make it impossible for Vanessa to walk away with anything except her personal belongings. That's going to be difficult. California is a community property state, and you've been married for... I have evidence of elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. Ethan's voice was ice. And before the week is out, I'm going to have a lot more. So prepare the papers, Kenneth, and prepare to go nuclear if necessary. He spent the next 3 hours in his office assembling the puzzle pieces. Diane sent over the trust fund documents. Everything perfect, everything untouched, exactly as it should be. The account sent monthly statements to an email address Ethan didn't recognize. One quick trace revealed it was registered to someone named Vanessa Cole. His wife had been intercepting Lena's financial information for 3 years, had convinced her the money didn't exist while watching it grow month after month in an account Lena didn't even know she had. Marcus delivered the security footage at midnight. Ethan loaded it onto his private system and started watching, skipping through weeks of mundane household activity until he found what he was looking for. March 15th. A woman in a worn coat standing at the front door speaking to James the butler. Even without audio, Ethan could read Lena's body language, hopeful, nervous, determined. James looked uncomfortable, gesturing for her to wait. 5 minutes later, Vanessa appeared. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. Ethan watched his wife's face cycle through surprise, calculation, and finally cold decision. She sent James away and led Lena inside, but not toward the main house, toward the service entrance, toward the basement. The next 4 months of footage made his blood boil. Lena cleaning, cooking, serving Vanessa's friends like hired help, never eating at the family table, doing laundry in the basement wash tub because the main laundry room was off limits, disappearing into her tiny room every night, emerging early each morning to begin again. And through it all, Vanessa playing the generous hostess, taking credit for her charitable nature at society luncheons, describing her act of kindness to the poor elderly woman she'd rescued from homelessness. But the worst footage was from 2 weeks ago. Vanessa, on her cell phone in the conservatory, speaking to someone off camera. The timestamp showed it was 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, when Vanessa knew Ethan would be in back-to-back meetings. Marcus had enhanced the audio. Ethan put in his earbuds and listened to his wife's voice, crystal clear through the security system's high-end microphones. Dr. Pemberton, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Yes, I'm calling about our previous discussion. The woman I mentioned, Lena Brooks. I think we need to move forward with the evaluation. No, she's not violent, but her behavior is increasingly erratic. She insists she has some kind of relationship with my husband from decades ago, but he's never mentioned her. Yes, I think institutionalization might be necessary for her own safety. How soon can we arrange it? The conversation continued for 12 minutes. Dr. Pemberton laid out a process that was disturbingly efficient. A home visit, a quick evaluation, signatures from family members claiming the patient was a danger to herself or others, and then immediate placement. The whole thing could be done in 48 hours. And the financial arrangements? Vanessa's voice turned businesslike. The referral fee we discussed, yes, I understand it needs to be discreet. An annual consulting contract for my design firm sounds perfect. $50,000 seems fair for the inconvenience. $50,000. Vanessa was selling Lena into institutional imprisonment for $50,000 and the social credit of looking charitable. Ethan saved the file, backed it up in 3 separate locations, and sent encrypted copies to both Kenneth and Marcus. Then he sat back and tried to process the magnitude of his wife's betrayal. It wasn't just about Lena, though that would have been enough. This revealed something deeper and more disturbing. A capacity for calculated cruelty, for exploiting the vulnerable, for turning human suffering into profit. If she could do this to an elderly woman who'd come looking for help, what else was she capable of? What else had she already done? His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Initial background complete. You need to see this. Sending secure file now. The file loaded and Ethan started reading. 20 minutes later, he understood. Vanessa Cole, born Vanessa Hartwell in Portland, Oregon, had a history. 3 previous relationships with wealthy men, each ending in lucrative settlements. A pattern of befriending vulnerable people in the orbit of her targets, gathering information, positioning herself as indispensable before revealing her true nature. She'd met Ethan at a charity gala 6 years ago, but their meeting hadn't been an accident. Marcus had traced her attendance back to a professional social coordinator who specialized in strategic introductions for a hefty fee. Vanessa had paid $15,000 for the chance to accidentally bump into the rising tech mogul who'd just sold his second company. Everything had been calculated. The shared interests, the chance encounters, even her friendship with his business partner's wife, all carefully orchestrated. Ethan hadn't been falling in love. He'd been being hunted, and like an idiot, he'd walked right into the trap. His office door opened. Ethan looked up to find Lena standing in the doorway, wrapped in one of the guest suite's plush robes. She looked clean and warm and fed, but her eyes held concern. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." She came in, settling into one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "But I know that look. You're planning something." "I'm fixing things." Ethan gestured at his wall of monitors. "Finding out the truth." "And what will you do with the truth once you have it?" Lena asked quietly. "Make sure she can never hurt anyone else the way she hurt you." He met her eyes. "Make sure she pays for what she's done." "Ethan," Lena leaned forward, "I didn't come here for revenge. I came because I missed you, because I wanted to see the man you'd become. And baby, I'm so proud of what you've built. But not if it costs you your peace." "My peace?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Lena, I've been living a lie. My marriage, my home, probably half my social circle. It's all built on manipulation and deception. Finding that out doesn't cost me peace. It gives me clarity." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to divorce her. Take back everything she stole, from me, from you, from whoever else she's hurt." He paused. "But first, I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly who Vanessa Cole really is. That sounds like anger talking. It's justice talking. Ethan's voice was firm. You taught me that, remember? You taught me that standing up to bullies, fighting for what's right, protecting people who can't protect themselves, that's not about revenge. It's about making sure the strong don't destroy the weak. Lena smiled sadly. I taught you that when you were 12 and dealing with playground fights. This is different. No, it's not. Ethan stood, moving to look out at the city. It's exactly the same. Vanessa is a bully with better clothes and a bigger playground, but the principle is identical. You don't let cruel people win just because confronting them is uncomfortable. And you're sure you're ready for what comes next? Lena joined him at the window. Because, baby, once you start this, there's no going back. Your life is going to change in ways you can't predict. My life already changed. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. The moment I heard what she said about you, the moment I saw where she'd put you, that changed everything. They stood together in silence, watching the city lights flicker and glow. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was probably calling her lawyers, her friends, her allies, building her defense, preparing her attack, confident in her ability to manipulate her way through any crisis. She had no idea what was coming. Get some sleep, Ethan finally said. Tomorrow, I want you to meet with my lawyers. We're going to sort out the trust fund, make sure you have full access to everything you should have had all along. And then, he squeezed her shoulder. Then I want you to tell me what you need, where you want to live, what you want to do. No limits, no conditions, just what would make you happy. I'm happy right now. Lena looked up at him. My boy came back for me. That's all I ever needed. You deserve more than that. Ethan's voice was fierce. You deserve everything, and I'm going to make sure you get it. After Lena returned to her suite, Ethan went back to work. There was evidence to organize, lawyers to brief, accounts to secure. And somewhere in the middle of compiling his case against Vanessa, he started digging into something that had been nagging at him. Dr. Martin Pemberton. Serenity Heights Elder Care. The referral fees and consulting contracts. What he found made everything else look like petty theft. Serenity Heights was part of a network, 7 facilities across California, all owned by the same parent company, all specializing in expedited placement of elderly patients, all charging premium rates while providing minimal care, and all connected through a web of kickbacks, referrals, and consulting fees to people like Vanessa who could deliver vulnerable clients. The facilities had been investigated twice in the last 5 years. Both investigations had been quietly closed after large donations to the right political campaigns. Ethan kept digging. By 3 a.m, he had names, dates, financial transactions, and connections that painted a picture of systematic elder abuse on a massive scale. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, trapped in facilities where they didn't belong, while their assets were drained to pay for unnecessary care. And Vanessa had been trying to add Lena to that list. He sent everything to Marcus with a simple instruction. Verify this. I want to be absolutely certain before I move. Marcus responded within minutes. Already on it. This is bigger than we thought. How big? Congressional investigation big. Federal fraud charges big. This could bring down some very powerful people. Ethan smiled grimly. Good. Dawn was breaking over San Francisco when he finally shut down his computers. In 6 hours, he had a meeting with Kenneth to review the divorce papers. This afternoon, he was sitting down with Diane to restore Lena's access to her trust fund. Tomorrow, he was hosting a small dinner where Lena would meet his real friends, the ones who'd known him before the money, who'd understand why this mattered. And next week, at Vanessa's precious charity gala, he was going to detonate a bomb that would destroy her carefully constructed world. But first, he needed a few hours of sleep, and he needed to check on Lena one more time. He found her asleep in the guest suite, curled up in the center of the massive bed like she couldn't quite believe it was real. The room was warm, the lights soft, everything comfortable and safe, the way it should have been from the moment she arrived. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching the steady rise and fall of her breathing, and made a promise, not just to her, but to the 7-year-old boy she'd saved, the teenager she'd raised, the man he'd become because of her sacrifices. Vanessa thought she'd won by hiding Lena away, by trying to erase her from his life. But she'd made a critical miscalculation. She'd forgotten where Ethan Cole came from. The south side of Chicago didn't produce soft men. And Lena Brooks hadn't raised someone who walked away when things got hard. Vanessa wanted a war. She was going to get one. The morning sun filtered through the guest suite windows, catching dust motes and golden shafts of light. Ethan had managed 3 hours of sleep before his body's internal clock dragged him back to consciousness. He showered in his private bathroom, noting with grim satisfaction that Vanessa's side of the master suite was untouched. She'd apparently chosen to spend the night elsewhere, probably at her mother's Nob Hill penthouse, rallying her troops. Good. Let her plan. Let her strategize. Every hour she spent preparing her defense was another hour he spent building an airtight case. By 8 o'clock, he was back in his office with fresh coffee and a video call queued up with Kenneth Morrison. His lawyer appeared on screen looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his usually perfect silver hair slightly askew. "Tell me you got some sleep," Kenneth said without preamble. "Enough. What did you find?" Kenneth's expression turned grave. "Ethan, the prenuptial agreement you signed is problematic, very problematic." Define problematic. "It was drafted by Vanessa's attorney, not mine. You signed it 3 days before the wedding, which any decent lawyer will argue was under duress. And there are clauses in here that are—" Kenneth paused, choosing his words carefully. "Let's just say they're unusually favorable to Vanessa. In the event of divorce, she's entitled to 50% of any assets acquired during the marriage, plus a monthly stipend of $200,000 for life, and she retains full ownership of any property titled in her name." Ethan's jaw tightened. How much property is titled in her name? The house in Tahoe, the condo in New York, about $12 million in various investment accounts that you transferred to her for tax purposes. Kenneth's tone made clear what he thought of that decision. "Ethan, I told you not to sign anything without my review. I was in love, I was stupid." Ethan forced himself to focus. "Can we fight it?" "We can try, but it's going to be expensive and ugly. Unless," Kenneth leaned forward, "unless we can prove fraud in the inducement. If we can demonstrate that Vanessa entered the marriage under false pretenses with the specific intent to defraud you, the prenup becomes voidable. I sent you evidence last night, the background check Marcus ran. I saw it. It's good, but it's not enough. We need something concrete, a pattern of behavior that proves intent from the beginning." Kenneth pulled up his own notes. "The elder abuse situation with Lena Brooks is damning, but it happened during the marriage, not before. We need to show that Vanessa was running a con from day one." Then we dig deeper. Ethan's mind was already racing ahead. Marcus is still investigating. There have to be others. Other men she targeted, other people she hurt. Find them. Already working on it. "But Ethan, I need to ask, are you absolutely certain you want to do this? Because once we file, once this becomes public, your life is going to become a media circus. Every business deal you've ever made will be scrutinized. Your competitors will use this against you. Your board might get nervous." "My board can deal with it. This isn't about business." Ethan's voice was steel. "This is about making sure Vanessa Cole doesn't destroy anyone else the way she tried to destroy Lena." "Then we go to war." Kenneth nodded. "I'll have preliminary papers drawn up by end of day. In the meantime, don't sign anything, don't make any financial transactions without clearing them with me first, and for God's sake, don't talk to Vanessa without witnesses present." The call ended and Ethan immediately queued up his next meeting. Diane Chen appeared on screen, her expression troubled. "I've been going through the trust fund communications," she said. "Ethan, this is worse than identity theft. Someone has been systematically intercepting every statement, every notification, every piece of correspondence related to Lena Brooks's account for the past 3 years. Vanessa. Almost certainly. But here's what concerns me. The email address registered to receive these documents was set up using your personal information. Your social security number, your mother's maiden name, all the security questions. Whoever did this had access to your most private data." Ethan felt ice forming in his chest. What else could they access with that information? Potentially everything. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, business records. Diane's concern was evident. "I'm recommending we do a complete security audit of all your accounts. Today." "Do it. And Diane, I want Lena Brooks to have full access to her trust fund within 24 hours. Can you make that happen?" "Already in process. I'll hand-deliver the access codes and passwords to her personally. She'll have complete control over the account by this time tomorrow." Diane hesitated. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I should have noticed the communication irregularities sooner. You had no reason to suspect anything. Vanessa played all of us." He rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of sleepless nights catching up with him. "Just make sure Lena has everything she needs. And Diane? Set up a separate account for her. 2 million, unrestricted access. I don't want her to feel dependent on anyone ever again." After Diane signed off, Ethan allowed himself 5 minutes to simply breathe. His carefully constructed life was unraveling, revealing rot at the foundation. How many other things had he missed? How many other lies had he believed? A soft knock at the office door interrupted his thoughts. Lena entered carrying a breakfast tray, fresh fruit, croissants, coffee that actually smelled decent for once. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting it on his desk. "You look like you've been up all night." "Most of it." He gestured for her to sit. "How did you sleep?" "Like I was floating on a cloud." Lena's smile was genuine but tinged with sadness. "I kept waking up thinking it was a dream, that I'd be back in that basement room when morning came." "You're never going back there. Never." Ethan poured coffee for both of them. "Lena, I need to ask you some questions. About what happened when you first came here. Can you walk me through it?" Lena wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, gathering her thoughts. "It was early March, maybe the 10th or 11th. I'd been trying to reach you for weeks, but your assistant kept saying you were traveling, unavailable. So I decided to just come to San Francisco, show up in person. Why didn't you use the emergency number I gave you?" "I lost it." She looked embarrassed. "After Harold died, I had to move out of our house, downsize to a small apartment. Things got lost in the shuffle. I know I should have been more careful, but this isn't your fault." Ethan's voice was firm. "None of this is your fault. Keep going. I found your address online, took the bus from the airport because I couldn't afford a taxi. When I got here, the butler, James, I think his name is, he was very polite, said he'd get Mrs. Cole. I was so excited, Ethan. I thought I was finally going to see you, tell you everything that had happened. But Vanessa answered the door instead. She was beautiful, elegant, everything I'm not." Lena's voice was soft. "She listened to my story, asked a few questions. Then she told me you'd never mentioned having a foster mother, that you'd grown up in boarding schools, that your childhood was something you never discussed." Ethan's hands clenched around his coffee cup. "She told you I denied you." Not in those exact words, but the implication was clear. Either I was mistaken or I was lying. Lena met his eyes. She said she didn't want to upset you with a false claim, but she also didn't want to turn away someone in need. So she offered me a place to stay while we sorted things out. The basement. She called it the au pair suite, said it was temporary, just until you came back from your business trip and we could all sit down together. Lena's laugh was bitter. I believed her. I was grateful. What happened next? She gave me some chores, small things at first, tidying the kitchen, folding laundry, said it would help me feel useful, earn my keep. I didn't mind. I've never been afraid of work. Lena stared into her coffee. But then the chores got bigger, more demanding, and you never came home. Every time I asked about you, she said you'd been delayed, extended your trip, had urgent business in Asia, in Europe, in South America. She was lying. I know that now. But then I just thought, well, you're a busy man, important. It made sense that you'd be traveling constantly. Lena's voice cracked slightly. I waited, Ethan. I waited and worked and tried to make myself useful, tried to prove I wasn't just some burden who'd shown up expecting charity. And the trust fund? When did she tell you it didn't exist? About 6 weeks after I arrived. I mentioned it once, said I didn't want to be a charity case, that I had some money from you that I could access if I just had a computer or a phone to log in. Lena's expression darkened. Vanessa looked at me like I'd said something crazy. She said there was no trust fund, no money, that if there had been anything like that, she would know about it. Then she got very concerned, very gentle, started asking if I was confused, if I sometimes had trouble remembering things clearly. She was gaslighting you. That's what the therapist I saw last month would have called it, if I'd been able to afford more than one session. Lena smiled sadly. She made me doubt myself, Ethan. Made me wonder if I'd imagined the trust fund, if my grief over Harold had mixed up my memories. By the end, I couldn't trust my own mind. Ethan stood abruptly, needing to move before his rage found a target. Did she hurt you, physically? No, never, Lena was quick to clarify. The cruelty was subtler than that, forgetting to save me dinner, letting her friends treat me like invisible staff, making comments about how people my age often became confused, paranoid, difficult to manage, and always with this concerned, caring tone, like she was so worried about my well-being. While she was setting you up to be institutionalized, Lena's head snapped up. What? Ethan explained what he'd found. The calls to Dr. Pemberton, the plans for evaluation and placement, the referral fees. Lena listened in growing horror, her hands trembling around the coffee cup. She was going to have me locked away? Lena's voice was barely a whisper. Like I was crazy? Like I was dangerous? She was going to have you declared incompetent and placed in a facility where she'd control your care, and she was going to profit from it. Ethan knelt in front of her chair, taking her shaking hands in his. But she didn't succeed. You're here, you're safe, and I promise you she's never going to hurt you or anyone else again. How can you stop her? She's your wife. She has rights. Not for long. Ethan's voice was granite. I'm divorcing her, Lena, and I'm making sure the world knows exactly what kind of person Vanessa Cole really is. Ethan, no. Lena pulled her hands away. You can't destroy your marriage because of me. The scandal, the publicity, it could ruin everything you've built. What I've built is hollow if I built it with someone like Vanessa. He stood, pacing to the window. And it's not just about you anymore. Marcus found something last night, evidence that this elder abuse scheme is bigger than we thought. There are other people, Lena, other vulnerable people being exploited by this network of facilities and doctors. If I don't expose it, who will? You could get hurt, professionally, financially. I'll survive. I've survived worse. He turned back to her. You taught me that, remember? When I was 14 and got rejected from that summer program I wanted so badly. You told me that setbacks don't define us. How we respond to them does. That was about a summer program, not your entire life. The principle is the same. Ethan returned to his desk, pulling up files on his computer. I'm meeting with lawyers this afternoon. Tomorrow, Diane is coming by to set up your full access to the trust fund. And next week, he paused. Next week is Vanessa's charity gala. 500 guests, all of San Francisco society, plus media coverage. She's been planning it for months. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell the truth. Ethan's smile was cold. Every word of it. Heard, with evidence to back it up. Lena stood, moving to stand beside him at the window. And if she fights back? If she tries to destroy you? Then we'll see who's better at this game. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. But I've got something she doesn't have. What's that? The truth. And you. He squeezed gently. She thinks I'm just some tech mogul who got lucky. She doesn't understand that I learned to fight in places where losing meant going hungry. She grew up in country clubs and debutante balls. I grew up on the south side of Chicago with you teaching me that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies even when you're scared. I taught you to choose your battles wisely. This is the wisest battle I've ever chosen. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls and planning. Marcus arrived at noon with updated background information. 3 more women had come forward with stories about Vanessa, each following the same pattern. Strategic meeting, whirlwind romance, marriage, then systematic financial exploitation before an expensive divorce. She's done this before, Marcus said, spreading documents across Ethan's desk. 4 times before you, actually. The first was when she was 22, married a real estate developer twice her age. Divorced him 18 months later with a settlement of $3 million. Then a venture capitalist, a hedge fund manager, and a tech entrepreneur. Each time, bigger settlements, better terms. And I was supposed to be the biggest score yet. Ethan studied the papers. What happened to the other men? 2 of them are still bitter, but moved on, got remarried, rebuilt their lives. Marcus pulled up photos on his tablet. But this one, Thomas Brennan, the tech entrepreneur, he tried to fight back, Claimed fraud, hired investigators, threatened to expose her. What happened? He dropped everything and settled for twice what she originally asked for. Marcus's expression was grim. I tracked down his lawyer. Off the record, he told me Vanessa threatened to fabricate abuse allegations, said she had medical records prepared, witness statements ready to go. Brennan had a company about to go public. He couldn't afford the scandal. She blackmailed him. Effectively, yes. And she'll try the same thing with you. Marcus leaned forward. Ethan, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Vanessa has had years to perfect this system. She knows how to weaponize sympathy, how to make herself the victim. The moment you file for divorce, she's going to paint you as a powerful man abusing his position to discard an innocent wife. Let her try. Ethan's voice was steady. I've got documentation of everything she did to Lena. Video evidence, financial records, witness testimony from the staff. She can play victim all she wants. The truth is going to bury her. The truth doesn't always win in court, or in public opinion. Marcus pulled up another file. Which is why we need to be strategic. I've been talking to some contacts in investigative journalism. If we can get the elder abuse story to the right reporter, someone with credibility and reach, it changes the narrative from bitter divorce to social justice expose. You want to go to the media? I want to get ahead of this before Vanessa controls the story. Marcus's tactical mind was evident. She's going to use her society connections, her charitable reputation, her carefully cultivated image. We need something bigger than he said, she said divorce allegations. Ethan considered this, his mind working through scenarios. What about the gala next week? Vanessa's been promoting it for months. All the major donors will be there, plus journalists covering the charity angle. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that if we're going to expose her, we do it in front of the people who've been funding her charade. Ethan's expression hardened. We let her have her moment in the spotlight, and then we show everyone who she really is. Marcus smiled grimly. That's bold. Also incredibly risky. I know. But staying silent while she destroys other people, that's a risk I'm not willing to take. That afternoon, Kenneth arrived at the house with a team of lawyers. They commandeered the formal dining room, spreading contracts and depositions across the antique table that Vanessa had purchased from a French chateau. We've identified 17 actionable claims, Kenneth said, walking Ethan through each one. Fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, the list goes on. But here's the challenge. Most of these crimes were committed against Lena, not you. You're not the direct victim. I'm her foster son. That counts for something. In moral terms, absolutely. In legal terms, Kenneth grimaced. It's complicated. We need Lena to press charges herself. Then we'll ask her. Ethan started to stand. Wait. Kenneth held up a hand. Before you do that, you need to understand what you're asking of her. If Lena presses charges, she becomes the face of this case. She'll be deposed, cross-examined, probably dragged through the media as Vanessa's lawyers try to discredit her testimony. They'll dig into her past, question her memory, suggest she's a con artist who targeted you. It's going to be brutal. Ethan sank back into his chair. There has to be another way. There might be. One of Kenneth's associates, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, spoke up. If we can prove that Vanessa's actions were part of a larger criminal conspiracy, the elder abuse network you uncovered, then federal prosecutors might get involved. That takes the burden off Lena and puts it on the government. How do we make that happen? Evidence. Lots of it. We need to connect Vanessa directly to Dr. Pemberton and Serenity Heights. We need financial records showing the kickback scheme. We need testimony from other victims. Patricia pulled out her laptop. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're interested, but they need more than circumstantial evidence. Give me 48 hours. Marcus had been listening quietly from the corner. I've got investigators tracking down former employees from Serenity Heights, patients who were placed there under questionable circumstances, family members who suspected fraud but couldn't prove it. If this network is as big as we think, someone will talk. Do it. Ethan stood, decision made. Whatever resources you need, you have them. I want this network exposed and destroyed. The legal team worked until well past dinner, building a case brick by brick. Ethan found Lena in the library around 9 o'clock, reading a worn paperback in one of the leather armchairs. You should be resting, he said. I've rested enough in my life. Right now I need to keep my mind busy. She set down the book. How bad is it? Complicated, but we're making progress. He sat across from her. Lena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Always. If we pursue criminal charges against Vanessa, you're going to be central to the case, which means lawyers, depositions, possibly testifying in court. They're going to question everything, your memory, your motives, your relationship with me. It's going to be invasive and painful. Lena was quiet for a long moment. What happens if I don't press charges? We focus on the divorce, try to minimize the financial damage. Vanessa walks away with millions and probably does this to someone else down the line. And the other people? The ones being exploited by those care facilities? We can still pursue that through federal channels, but it's harder without your testimony. The whole case is weaker. Lena stood, moving to the window that overlooked the garden. Outside, automatic sprinklers were painting rainbows in the evening light, watering flowers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. You know what I've been thinking about? She said softly. All those mornings in the basement, listening to your wife and her friends talk about charity and compassion and helping the less fortunate. And I'd think, they have no idea. No idea what it's like to actually be vulnerable, to actually need help. To them, poverty is an abstract concept they throw fundraisers for. I know. But the people in those facilities, the ones being exploited, they know. They understand what it means to be powerless, to have no voice, to be completely dependent on the kindness or cruelty of strangers. She turned back to face him. If I stay quiet to protect myself, what does that make me? A survivor. Someone who's already been through enough. Or a coward. Lena's voice was steel. You raised me to believe that we stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I didn't raise you. You raised me. Then I did a good job, she smiled, because the man standing in front of me right now, the one willing to blow up his entire life to protect an old woman, that's not someone who learned to walk away from fights. That's someone who learned to fight smarter, but never to stop fighting. Ethan felt something tight in his chest loosen. You're sure? I'm terrified, Lena admitted. But I'm sure. We do this right. We expose everything. And we make sure no one else has to live in a basement, wondering if anyone remembers they exist. Then we go to war. Ethan crossed to her, pulling her into a hug. Together. Together. Lena held on tight, just like old times. The next morning, Diane arrived with documents for Lena to sign. They sat in the conservatory, a deliberate choice by Ethan, reclaiming the space where Vanessa's book club had mocked the woman who deserved only respect. Ms. Brooks, you now have complete control over a trust fund valued at $4.2 million. Diane handed over a leather portfolio. These are your account access codes, passwords, and contact information for our wealth management team. They'll help you with anything you need, withdrawals, investments, tax planning. Lena stared at the papers like they might bite. 4 million? 4.2. Diane smiled. Mr. Cole established the trust 7 years ago with an initial deposit of 2 million. Conservative investments have grown it substantially since then. I don't understand. Vanessa lied. Ethan squeezed Lena's shoulder. This money has always been yours. You just didn't know how to access it. I can't accept this. Lena tried to push the portfolio away. It's too much. I didn't earn it. You earned it every day for 11 years, Ethan's voice was firm. Every meal you put on the table working 2 jobs. Every time you helped me with homework when you were exhausted. Every sacrifice you made so I could have opportunities you never had. This isn't charity, Lena. It's the smallest possible repayment for what you gave me. Tears streamed down Lena's face as she finally accepted the portfolio. What am I supposed to do with $4 million? Whatever makes you happy. Ethan crouched beside her chair. Buy a house, travel, start a foundation, sit on a beach somewhere and do absolutely nothing. It's your money, your choice. Diane cleared her throat gently. If I may make a suggestion, you don't have to decide everything today. Take your time. Get comfortable with the idea. Our team can help you explore options whenever you're ready. After Diane left, Lena sat holding the portfolio like it might disappear if she let go. "I don't know how to be rich," she said finally. "Neither did I." Ethan laughed. "I was 26 years old, signing papers for $18 million, and all I could think was, how do I make sure I don't lose this? How do I prove I deserve it?" "You earned every penny." "So did you." He stood, looking out at the garden. "And now you never have to worry about money again. Never have to wonder where your next meal is coming from, whether you can afford rent, what happens if you get sick. It doesn't feel real." "It will." Ethan turned back to her. "Give it time." That evening, Marcus returned with news that changed everything. He found Ethan in his office, still working through legal documents at 10 o'clock at night. "We found them," Marcus said without preamble. "Found who?" "The other victims. 15 people who were placed in Serenity Heights facilities over the last 3 years under suspicious circumstances. And Ethan, 6 of them were referred by associates of Vanessa." Ethan's head snapped up. "She's done this before?" "Multiple times. Different people from her social circle, all following the same playbook. Elderly relative becomes difficult. Quick evaluation by Dr. Pemberton or one of his associates. Immediate placement. Families relieved to have the problem handled." Marcus spread documents across the desk. "But here's the interesting part. In 4 cases, the person who made the referral received consulting fees or donations to their favorite charities shortly after placement. It's a referral network." "Exactly, and it goes higher than we thought." Marcus pulled up a file on his tablet. 3 state legislators have family members in these facilities. 2 Superior Court judges, even a deputy district attorney, people with the power to squash investigations, to make problems go away. That's why the previous investigations went nowhere. Precisely. But here's our opening, one of the victims I found. Martha Whitmore. She was a federal prosecutor before early-onset Alzheimer's made her vulnerable. Her daughter has been fighting the placement for 18 months, insisting her mother isn't as impaired as Dr. Pemberton claimed. She's documented everything: the rushed evaluation, the forged consent forms, the family being pressured to agree. Will she testify? She'll do more than that. She's already contacted the FBI. Marcus smiled grimly. Turns out when you try to institutionalize a federal prosecutor's mother for profit, someone eventually notices. The investigation is already underway. They've just been waiting for the right leverage to crack the network open. And Vanessa is about to become their star witness, whether she wants to or not. Marcus pulled up phone records, financial transactions, email threads. We can connect her to at least 8 questionable placements. The referral fees alone amount to wire fraud. Add in conspiracy, elder abuse, financial exploitation, the federal charges alone could put her away for 20 years. Ethan stared at the evidence, feeling the weight of it settle over him. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. This wasn't even just about Lena. This was about dismantling a system that preyed on the most vulnerable members of society for profit. "When do we move?" he asked. "The FBI wants to coordinate with local authorities. Simultaneous raids on all 7 facilities, arrests of key players, seizure of financial records." Marcus met his eyes. "They're talking about next week. Wednesday, specifically." "That's 2 days before Vanessa's gala." "I know, which means we need to decide. Do we wait for federal authorities to make their move, or do we expose Vanessa publicly first and let the chips fall where they may?" Ethan considered this. Waiting meant a cleaner case, better coordination, more certainty of conviction. But it also meant more time for Vanessa to hurt people. More days of vulnerable people trapped in facilities they didn't need. More opportunities for the network to cover its tracks. "We don't wait," he said finally. "We go forward with the gala plan. We expose everything publicly, create enough pressure that hiding becomes impossible. And when the FBI makes their move on Wednesday, everyone will already know why." "That's risky." "I know, but it's right." Ethan stood, decision made. "Contact the journalists you mentioned. I want them at the gala. And Marcus, make sure everything is documented, verified, bulletproof. When I stand up in front of 500 people and accuse my wife of running an elder abuse scheme, I need to be absolutely certain every word is true." "You'll have it." 3 days until the gala. 3 days to prepare, to gather evidence, to build an unassailable case. 3 days until Ethan Cole burned down his marriage and possibly his reputation to protect people most of society ignored. He thought about Lena, asleep upstairs in a warm bed after months in a cold basement. Thought about the 15 other people Marcus had found, trapped in facilities where they didn't belong. Thought about all the others still out there, still suffering, still invisible. And he knew without question that he was making the right choice. Vanessa had built her empire on the backs of vulnerable people. On Friday night, in front of all of San Francisco society, that empire was going to collapse, and Ethan was going to make sure the whole world watched it burn. The mansion transformed over the next 3 days into something resembling a war room disguised as a home. Marcus set up encrypted communications in Ethan's office. Kenneth's legal team occupied the library with depositions and affidavits, and a rotating cast of investigators came and went through the service entrance at all hours. Through it all, Lena moved quietly through the spaces Vanessa had once controlled, reclaiming them simply by existing in them with dignity. Wednesday morning brought Diane back with someone unexpected, a woman in her mid-50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Cole, this is Special Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI Financial Crimes Division." Diane made the introduction in the conservatory, where Ethan had been reviewing Marcus's latest findings. Torres extended her hand with the no-nonsense efficiency of someone who'd spent decades dealing with white-collar criminals. "Mr. Cole, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Agent Torres." Ethan shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled." "We didn't, but when I reviewed the evidence your security team compiled, I decided this conversation couldn't wait." She settled into one of the chairs without waiting for an invitation. "You've stumbled onto something significant, bigger than you probably realize." "How big?" "Multi-state, potentially hundreds of victims, connections to organized crime." Torres pulled out a tablet. "Serenity Heights is part of a network we've been investigating for 18 months. Elder care facilities that operate on the margins of legality, maximizing profit by minimizing care. But we've never been able to prove systematic fraud until now." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "What changed?" "You did. Your wife did." Torres pulled up financial records. "Vanessa Cole's referral fees created a paper trail we can follow. The emails to Dr. Pemberton, the consulting contracts, the suspicious timing of payments, it's all evidence of conspiracy to defraud. And because some of the victims are veterans receiving federal benefits, this becomes a federal crime." "What do you need from me?" "Everything you've got, and I need you to hold off on any public accusations until we can coordinate arrests." Torres met his eyes. "I understand you're planning something at a charity event on Friday. I'm asking you to reconsider." "No." Ethan's response was immediate. Torres's expression hardened. "Mr. Cole, if you expose this network prematurely, key players will destroy evidence. They'll flee jurisdiction. We'll lose our chance to dismantle the entire operation. And if I wait, how many more people get trapped in those facilities? How many more families get exploited?" Ethan leaned forward. "Agent Torres, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not going to stay silent while vulnerable people suffer so you can build a cleaner case. This isn't about clean cases. This is about making sure convictions stick." Torres's voice sharpened. "You want justice? So do I. But I want it to last longer than a news cycle." The tension in the room was palpable. Diane shifted uncomfortably while Lena, who'd been listening from the doorway, finally spoke. "What if we did both?" she asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Lena stepped into the room, her posture straight despite her obvious nervousness. "What if Ethan exposes Vanessa publicly, but only Vanessa? The personal story. The elder abuse? What she did to me?" Lena looked at Torres. "That gives you your news coverage, puts pressure on the system, but doesn't reveal the full scope of your investigation. People will be looking at Vanessa while you move on the network." Torres considered this, her tactical mind clearly working through scenarios. "It could work. Could, if we coordinate carefully." "How carefully?" Ethan asked. "You expose Vanessa's treatment of Ms. Brooks. You present evidence of fraud in your marriage. You file for divorce citing abuse and deception." Torres pulled up a calendar on her tablet. We execute search warrants on the facilities on Saturday morning. By the time the network realizes they're compromised, we'll have secured the evidence we need. And Vanessa? We'll be too busy dealing with the public relations nightmare to warn her co-conspirators. Torres almost smiled. Assuming you're as good at creating spectacles as your reputation suggests. I can manage that. Ethan felt the pieces clicking into place. But I need guarantees Lena gets full immunity for her cooperation. None of the other victims get blamed or prosecuted for anything related to this mess, and the media gets the full story once arrests are made. I can work with those terms. Torres stood, extending her hand again. But, Mr. Cole, understand this. Once you start Friday night, there's no going back. Your wife will fight dirty. Her lawyers will try to destroy Ms. Brooks's credibility. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to take down an entire criminal network? Ethan countered. Torres's smile was genuine this time. I've been ready for 18 months. Let's make this count. After the FBI agent left, Ethan found himself alone with Lena in the conservatory. The afternoon sun painted everything in golden light, making the room feel almost peaceful despite the storm gathering around them. You didn't have to do that, he said. Offer yourself up as the public face of this. Yes, I did. Lena settled into one of the chairs, looking suddenly exhausted. Those other people, the ones Marcus found, they're just like me, invisible, powerless. If I can give them a voice by telling my story, then that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be brutal. Vanessa's lawyers will try to paint you as unstable, opportunistic, maybe even dangerous. Let them try. Lena's voice held a strength that reminded Ethan of the woman who'd raised him through every challenge. I've survived worse than lawyers. I survived losing Harold, losing my home, living in that basement while your wife talked about me like I was garbage. I can survive people questioning my sanity. You shouldn't have to. None of us should have to. Lena reached over and took his hand. But we do what we have to do. You taught me that. Again, you taught me. Then we taught each other. She squeezed his hand. And on Friday night, we're going to teach Vanessa Cole that invisible people can still fight back. Thursday arrived with the controlled chaos of final preparations. The gala was set for Friday evening at the Legion of Honor Museum, one of Vanessa's favorite venues. She'd planned every detail months in advance: the catering, the flowers, the entertainment, the guest list carefully curated to include San Francisco's most influential donors and socialites. The event was supposed to raise money for senior wellness programs, a cause Vanessa had championed publicly while privately destroying the lives of actual seniors. The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. Marcus coordinated with Torres's team throughout the day, ensuring their timelines aligned perfectly. Kenneth prepared legal documents that would be filed Saturday morning, the moment the FBI executed their warrants. And Ethan worked with a media consultant named Rachel Kim, a former investigative journalist who now helped whistleblowers tell their stories effectively. You need to lead with emotion, not facts, Rachel said, reviewing his planned remarks. Facts are for the courtroom. Friday night is about making 500 people feel what Lena felt, making them see what Vanessa did. I have evidence, video, audio, documents, which you'll show, but first you tell the story. Rachel pulled up her notes. Start with who Lena is to you. Make them understand the relationship, then reveal what Vanessa did. Then show the proof. Story, impact, evidence, in that order. What if they don't believe me? They'll believe you. Rachel's confidence was absolute. Because you're going to have Lena there, live, in person, standing beside you. That's more powerful than any document. Ethan felt his stomach clench. I haven't asked her to do that. Then ask. Because Ethan, if you really want this to work, if you want people to care about what happened, they need to see her. Not as an abstract victim, but as a real person, your mother. He found Lena in the library that evening, reading to a group of staff members' children. One of the housekeepers had mentioned her daughter loved stories, and somehow Lena had turned it into an impromptu reading hour with 5 kids gathered around her chair, completely entranced by her narration of a fairy tale. Ethan waited until the story ended and the children scattered before approaching. You're good with kids, he observed. I had practice with you. Lena smiled. though you were never this well behaved during story time. I was a nightmare. You were perfect. She closed the book carefully. What's wrong? You have that look you used to get before big tests. I need to ask you something, and I need you to know you can say no. Ethan sat across from her. Tomorrow night, when I expose what Vanessa did, I want you there, on stage with me, so people can see you, hear you, understand who you are. Lena's hand stilled on the book. In front of 500 people? In front of 500 people, plus journalists, photographers, probably live stream cameras. He didn't sugarcoat it. It's a lot to ask, and if you're not ready, I'm not ready. Lena's voice was quiet but firm. I'm terrified. The idea of standing up there, having all those people staring at me, judging me, it makes me want to hide. Ethan's heart sank. Then you don't have to, but I'm going to do it anyway. She looked up, tears in her eyes but steel in her voice. Because being scared doesn't mean you don't act. It means you act despite the fear. You taught me that. When did I teach you that? When you were 12 and that boy twice your size was bullying the special needs kid at school. Lena smiled through her tears. You were terrified, but you stood up to him anyway. Got a black eye for your trouble, but you never regretted it. I'd forgotten about that. I didn't. I was so proud of you that day. She stood, setting the book aside. And tomorrow, you're going to be proud of me. We're going to walk into that gala together, and we're going to show everyone who Vanessa Cole really is. Friday dawned clear and cold, the kind of San Francisco morning that promised a beautiful evening. Ethan barely slept, his mind running through scenarios, backup plans, contingencies for every possible response. By 6 a.m., he was in his office reviewing everything one final time. Marcus arrived at 7 with a garment bag. Your armor for tonight. Inside was a perfectly tailored black suit, simple, elegant, powerful, without being ostentatious. The kind of outfit that commanded respect while letting the wearer's words take center stage. Rachel chose it, Marcus explained. She said you need to look like the billionaire you are, not the hurt husband you feel like. I don't feel hurt. Ethan examined the suit. I feel angry. Good. Anger is useful. Just keep it controlled. Marcus pulled up security plans on his tablet. We've got a team at the venue. 3 exits marked, car standing by in case things get ugly. Torres has agents embedded in the catering staff and valet service. The moment you finish your presentation, we extract you and Lena, and we disappear until the FBI makes their move tomorrow. What about Vanessa? She's at the venue now, overseeing final preparations, completely oblivious. Marcus's expression was grim. Her lawyers called my office yesterday trying to negotiate divorce terms. Very confident. They think you're bluffing about the abuse allegations. They're about to learn otherwise. At noon, Kenneth arrived with final documents. Everything's ready. The divorce papers, the abuse claims, the financial fraud allegations, all prepared to file first thing Saturday morning. The moment the FBI moves, we move. And the media? Rachel has confirmed attendance from the Chronicle, the Examiner, 3 local TV stations, and 2 national networks. They think they're covering a charity gala. They're about to get a much bigger story. Kenneth paused. Ethan, are you absolutely certain about this? Once you do this, there's no walking it back. I've never been more certain of anything. The afternoon passed in careful preparation. Lena worked with Rachel on what to say if asked to speak, though they agreed she'd stay silent unless absolutely necessary. Her presence would be powerful enough. Rachel also arranged for a stylist to help Lena choose an outfit that struck the right balance. Dignified, respectful, but not trying to compete with the designer gowns Vanessa's crowd would wear. When Lena emerged from the guest suite at 5 o'clock, Ethan felt his throat tighten. She wore a simple navy dress with a modest neckline, pearl earrings he'd given her years ago, and her hair styled in soft waves that softened her features. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman of grace and substance who didn't need flash to command respect. Too much? She asked nervously. Perfect. Ethan offered his arm. Ready? Not even a little bit. But she took his arm anyway. Let's do this before I lose my nerve. The drive to the Legion of Honor took 20 minutes through Friday evening traffic. Marcus rode with them in the town car, constantly monitoring communications with his security team. Torres checked in twice to confirm her agents were in position. "Remember," Marcus said as they approached the museum, "you stick to the plan, tell the story, show the evidence, get out. Don't engage with Vanessa directly. Don't take questions from her lawyers. Make your statement and leave." "Understood." Ethan squeezed Lena's hand. "You okay?" "Ask me again when this is over." But she squeezed back. The Legion of Honor sat majestically, overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, its neoclassical architecture glowing in the evening light. Vanessa had transformed the courtyard into an elegant wonderland, white roses everywhere, crystal chandeliers hanging from temporary structures, a string quartet playing softly as guests arrived in luxury vehicles. Ethan's town car pulled up to the valet stand. Through the tinted windows, he could see Vanessa holding court near the entrance, resplendent in a silver gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She was laughing with a cluster of society matrons, playing the perfect hostess, completely unaware that her world was about to implode. "Sir, they're expecting you to enter through the main entrance." The driver's voice was uncertain. "Should I—" "We enter through the main entrance." Ethan's voice was steel. "I'm not hiding." Marcus moved first, opening the door and scanning the area with professional efficiency. Then he nodded and Ethan stepped out, turning to help Lena from the car. The moment Vanessa saw him, her smile froze. She'd been expecting him to stay away, to let her have her triumph while he hid in shame. Seeing him arrive with Lena on his arm clearly wasn't part of her script. Ethan watched the calculation flash across her face. Acknowledge them and create a scene, or ignore them and pretend everything was fine. She chose the latter, turning back to her companions as if nothing was amiss. But the damage was done. People had noticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Ethan and Lena walked through the entrance. Everyone knew the Coles marriage was troubled. The gossip mills had been working overtime since Vanessa moved out earlier in the week. But no one knew why. They were about to find out. Inside, the museum's main hall had been transformed into a glittering ballroom. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space, each centerpiece a masterpiece of floral arrangement. The crowd was exactly what Ethan expected: tech moguls, venture capitalists, old money families, and the society climbers who orbited them like pilot fish around sharks. Rachel appeared at his elbow, looking professional in a dark pantsuit. "Everything's set. The AV team is ready. We're scheduled for your remarks at 7:30, right after dinner and before the auction." "Where's Vanessa?" "Working the room. She's been telling people you're here to publicly reconcile, that you're going to make a generous donation to smooth over the marital troubles." Rachel's smile was sharp. "She has no idea what's coming." Ethan and Lena found their seats at a table near the front, close enough to the stage to make a quick transition, far enough from Vanessa's table to avoid premature confrontation. Their table mates were a mix of tech entrepreneurs and their spouses, people Ethan knew casually from industry events. "Ethan, good to see you." David Chen, founder of a successful AI startup, extended his hand. "Vanessa mentioned you might not make it." "Wouldn't miss it." Ethan shook his hand, then introduced Lena. "This is Lena Brooks, my mother." The statement sent a ripple of confusion around the table. Everyone knew Ethan's mother had died when he was young, but before anyone could ask questions, servers appeared with the first course, and conversation shifted to safer topics. Dinner passed in a blur of small talk and growing tension. Ethan barely touched his food, too aware of the clock ticking down to 7:30. Across the room, Vanessa glittered and charmed, playing her role perfectly. She looked happy, confident, completely in control. Not for much longer. At 7:20, the MC, a local news anchor Vanessa had hired for the evening, took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for this wonderful celebration of senior wellness and community care. Before we begin our auction, we have a special presentation from our host, Vanessa Cole, and her husband, tech entrepreneur Ethan Cole." Vanessa's head snapped toward the stage, confusion flashing across her face. This wasn't part of the script. Ethan was supposed to make brief remarks later, not share the spotlight during her big moment. But she recovered quickly, standing with graceful composure and making her way to the stage. Ethan stood as well, offering his arm to Lena. She took it, her hand trembling slightly, and together they walked toward the stage. The room buzzed with speculation. This was clearly not the reconciliation announcement Vanessa had promised. On stage, Vanessa's smile was pure poison as Ethan and Lena joined her. "Darling, what a surprise! I didn't realize we were doing this together." "We're not." Ethan positioned himself center stage, Lena beside him, Vanessa forced to the side. "I'm doing this. You're just going to listen." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Ethan, this isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time and place." He turned to face the audience, 500 faces looking up at him with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I know you came to support senior wellness programs, and I promise, by the end of this evening, you'll understand why that cause matters more than you realize." Rachel gave him a subtle thumbs up from her position near the AV booth. The cameras were rolling, the journalists were paying attention. There was no turning back now. "My name is Ethan Cole, and this is Lena Brooks. 30 years ago, when I was 7 years old and living alone in a Chicago apartment after my mother died, Lena saved my life." His voice carried clearly through the sound system. "She took me in, raised me, gave me everything she had so I could have a chance at a future. She worked 2 jobs to keep me fed and clothed. She sat with me through nightmares and helped me with homework, and pushed me to dream bigger than my circumstances suggested I should." The room had gone completely silent. This wasn't the speech they'd expected. 11 years later, when I went to Stanford, Lena cried harder than I did. When I sold my first company, she was my first call. And when I made my first million, the first thing I did was set up a trust fund to make sure she'd never have to worry about money again. Ethan paused, letting that sink in. $4 million. Secure, invested conservatively, designed to give her financial freedom for the rest of her life. He could see people doing math in their heads, wondering where this was going. 3 months ago, Lena came to my home in San Francisco. She'd fallen on hard times after her husband died. Medical bills, property taxes, the kind of expenses that destroy even careful savings. She needed help, so she came to me. To the person she'd saved. To her son. Ethan turned to look at Vanessa. Her face was pale, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. My wife answered the door, and instead of bringing Lena to me, instead of letting me know that the most important person in my life needed help, Vanessa put her in our basement, gave her a room with no heat, no windows, no bathroom, made her work as unpaid labor, and told her that the trust fund I'd set up didn't exist. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa took a step forward. "That's not—" "It is." Ethan's voice cut through her protest. "And I can prove it." He nodded to Rachel. The screens behind him lit up with security footage, crystal clear video of Vanessa leading Lena to the basement, of Lena serving Vanessa's book club, of the tiny room where she'd slept for months. Then the audio played. Vanessa's voice, dripping with contempt, filled the hall. "She doesn't belong at this table. She belongs in the basement where I found her." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Vanessa's face went from pale to crimson as her own words condemned her. "These people, it's not natural. I think there might be something wrong with her mentally." More footage, more audio, months of cruelty documented in high definition, and finally the phone call with Dr. Pemberton. Vanessa's voice businesslike and cold as she arranged to have Lena institutionalized for a $50,000 referral fee. When the screens went dark, the silence was absolute. 500 people stared at Vanessa Cole like they'd never seen her before, because they hadn't. They'd seen the mask. Now they were seeing the monster underneath. Ethan turned back to the audience. "For 3 months, Lena lived in my basement, believing she had nowhere else to go, believing I didn't want to see her. While my wife attended charity events and gave speeches about compassion and senior wellness, the woman who raised me slept on a thin mattress in a room colder than this museum's storage vault." He felt Lena's hand find his, squeezing tight. Drawing strength or giving it, he wasn't sure. But this isn't just about Vanessa's cruelty to one elderly woman. It's about a system. The screens lit up again, this time with documents, financial records, referral networks, the full scope of the Serenity Heights conspiracy. My wife is part of a network that profits from institutionalizing vulnerable seniors. Facilities that provide minimal care while charging maximum rates. doctors who perform cursory evaluations and declare people incompetent, social circles that trade referrals like stock tips. He could see shock giving way to horror as people recognized names in the documents. Some of the faces in the crowd went pale as they realized their own connections to the network. 15 people that we know of have been placed in these facilities under questionable circumstances in the last 3 years alone. How many more are there? How many families have been told their elderly relatives needed institutional care when what they really needed was actual support? Ethan's voice rose with controlled passion. How many Lenas are sitting in facilities right now, wondering why their families abandoned them, not knowing they were sold for referral fees? Vanessa finally found her voice. This is slander. I'll sue you for every sue me. Ethan turned to face her fully. Take me to court. Put all of this in front of a judge. I'm begging you to try, because everything I've shown here tonight is documented, verified, and backed by evidence that will hold up under any scrutiny. He pulled out his phone, pulling up one final document. In fact, I've already filed for divorce citing elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. The papers will be served tomorrow morning. And Vanessa, he smiled without warmth, the FBI will be executing search warrants on Serenity Heights facilities at the same time. I hope your lawyers are expensive because you're going to need them. The room exploded. Journalists surged forward. Guests pulled out phones, recording everything. Vanessa stood frozen on stage, her perfect facade finally cracking as she realized the full scope of what had just happened. Ethan turned to Lena, whose tears were streaming freely down her face. Time to go. Marcus appeared at the stage stairs, security team flanking him. They moved quickly, surrounding Ethan and Lena and carving a path through the chaos. Behind them, Ethan could hear Vanessa's voice rising in protest, her lawyers trying to control the narrative, the MC attempting futilely to restore order. None of it mattered. The truth was out. The evidence was public, and by tomorrow morning, the full weight of federal law enforcement would descend on the network that had preyed on people like Lena for years. The town car was waiting exactly where Marcus had positioned it. They climbed inside, and the moment the doors closed, the sounds of chaos faded to muffled background noise. Lena turned to Ethan, her face a mixture of relief and disbelief. Did we really just do that? We really just did that. Ethan pulled her into a hug as the car pulled away from the Legion of Honor. It's over, Lena. You're safe, and Vanessa is never going to hurt anyone again. I can't believe... Lena's voice broke. All those people saw. They know now. They know what she is. And tomorrow the whole country will know. Marcus was already monitoring news feeds on his tablet. It's trending on Twitter. 3 local stations are breaking into programming. Rachel says CNN wants an interview. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Torres. Perfect. You gave us exactly what we needed. Warrants execute at 6 a.m. Stand by for updates. He showed it to Lena, who read it through tears and started laughing. We did it. We actually did it. You did it, Ethan corrected her. You stood up there in front of all those people and let them see you. Let them understand what Vanessa tried to do. That took more courage than anything I did. I was terrified. I know. But you did it anyway. He squeezed her hand. Just like you taught me. The car drove through the San Francisco night, carrying them away from the wreckage of Ethan's marriage and towards something he hadn't expected to find. Peace. The knowledge that he'd done the right thing, regardless of the cost. That he'd protected the woman who'd protected him. That he'd stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Somewhere behind them, Vanessa Cole's empire was crumbling. Her reputation destroyed. Her network exposed. Her carefully constructed life reduced to rubble by the truth she'd tried so hard to bury. And somewhere ahead, 15 people trapped in facilities they didn't belong in were about to be freed. Families were about to get answers. A corrupt system was about to face accountability. All because one elderly woman had shown up at a billionaire's door looking for help. And because that billionaire remembered who he'd been before the money, a scared kid who'd been saved by someone who saw his worth when no one else did. Ethan looked at Lena, still crying softly in the seat beside him, and made a silent promise. This was just the beginning. Exposing Vanessa was the first step. Making sure this never happened to anyone else, that was going to be his life's work. Because Lena Brooks had taught him something fundamental 30 years ago, something he'd almost forgotten in the pursuit of success and status. The measure of a person isn't what they build for themselves. It's what they're willing to tear down to protect others. The safe house Marcus had arranged sat in the Presidio, tucked behind eucalyptus trees with a view of the bay that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. Ethan barely noticed the scenery as they arrived just past 9 o'clock, adrenaline still coursing through his system like electricity through live wires. "You'll stay here until the FBI completes their operation tomorrow," Marcus explained, doing a quick security sweep of the rooms. "No social media, no public statements, minimal phone usage. Torres wants you completely off the grid until they've secured all 7 facilities." Lena sank into one of the leather couches, looking smaller somehow, despite her triumph at the gala. "How long do these things usually take?" 6 a.m. start time, coordinated raids across California. Marcus checked his watch. If everything goes according to plan, they should have everyone in custody by noon. Then the real work begins, processing evidence, taking statements, building cases. "And Vanessa?" Ethan couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "Her lawyers pulled her out of the gala 30 minutes after you left. She's probably holed up somewhere with a crisis management team trying to salvage what's left of her reputation." Marcus pulled up news feeds on his tablet. "But it's not going well. The video from tonight has been viewed 2 million times already. Vanessa Cole is trending nationwide." Ethan took the tablet, scrolling through the coverage. Every major outlet had picked up the story. The headlines were brutal and exactly what Vanessa deserved. Tech billionaire exposes wife's elder abuse scheme at charity gala. Hidden camera footage reveals society maven's cruel treatment of elderly woman. FBI investigating network of corrupt senior care facilities after explosive public allegations. The comment section was equally damning. People sharing their own stories of elderly relatives placed in questionable facilities, families pressured into decisions they'd regretted, loved ones who disappeared into the system and never came out. "It's working," Lena said quietly, reading over his shoulder. "People are paying attention." More than paying attention, they're angry. Ethan clicked through to a hashtag that had emerged organically in the last hour. Justice for Lena. Thousands of people expressing outrage, demanding accountability, calling for investigations into similar networks across the country. His phone buzzed with a call from Rachel. He put it on speaker so Lena could hear. "Ethan, the response is unprecedented. I've done crisis communications for 15 years and I've never seen anything move this fast." Rachel's voice was charged with professional excitement. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, they all want exclusive interviews. The New York Times is running a full investigative piece tomorrow. And 3 state attorneys general have already announced they're launching their own investigations into elder care facilities. What about Vanessa's response? Radio silence so far. Her PR team released a statement calling your allegations false and defamatory, threatening legal action, the usual deflection tactics. But nobody's buying it. The video evidence is too damning. Rachel paused. "Ethan, I need to ask, are you prepared for what comes next? Because this story is going to dominate news cycles for weeks. Your life, your business, everything is going to be under scrutiny." "Let them scrutinize." Ethan looked at Lena, who nodded encouragement. "I've got nothing to hide. And if the price of exposing this network is some temporary discomfort, I'll pay it gladly." "That's what I hoped you'd say. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be intense." After Rachel disconnected, Marcus made one final sweep of the safe house and then positioned himself in a chair by the front door. "I'll be here all night. Try to sleep, both of you." But sleep felt impossible. Ethan found himself pacing the living room while Lena sat curled on the couch, both of them too wired to rest despite their exhaustion. "Talk to me," Lena said finally. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking about all the things I missed." Ethan stopped pacing, facing her. 3 months, Lena. You were suffering in my own house for 3 months, and I didn't know, didn't check in, didn't question anything. What kind of person does that make me?" "The kind who trusts people." Lena patted the couch beside her. "The kind who built a marriage on the assumption that his partner shared his values. That's not a character flaw, baby. That's normal. Normal people don't let their mothers live in basements. Normal people don't know their mothers are living in basements." She took his hand as he sat. "Vanessa worked very hard to keep us separated. She intercepted communications, manipulated situations, created a story that explained my presence without requiring your involvement. She's been doing this for years, Ethan. You weren't her first victim, and you wouldn't have been her last. It doesn't excuse anything, but it explains it. Lena squeezed his hand. And more importantly, the moment you found out, you acted. You didn't make excuses, didn't try to minimize what happened, didn't choose your comfort over my safety. You burned down your entire life to make this right. You're worth it. I know I am. But a lot of people wouldn't have seen that. She smiled sadly. A lot of people would have quietly moved me somewhere nice, made sure I was comfortable, and asked me not to make waves. You could have handled this privately, protected your reputation, avoided all this public mess, and left the network in place to hurt more people. Exactly. You chose the hard right over the easy wrong. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. That's who you are. That's who I raised you to be. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights of San Francisco twinkle across the bay. Somewhere out there, families were reading about the scandal, probably wondering about their own elderly relatives, questioning decisions they'd been pressured into making. Somewhere, Vanessa was strategizing with lawyers, trying to find a way to spin this that didn't end with prison time. And somewhere, 15 people Marcus had identified were sleeping in facilities they didn't belong in, with no idea that tomorrow morning, federal agents would be coming to free them. What happens after tomorrow? Lena asked. After the FBI makes their arrests? After the news cycle moves on? We make sure it doesn't move on. Ethan had been thinking about this for days. We turn this into lasting change. Investigation into every elder care facility in California, then nationwide. Legal reforms to prevent this kind of exploitation. Resources for families who need help navigating the system. That's going to take years and money. I have both. He stood, energized by the vision taking shape. We'll start a foundation, not some vanity project, but a real organization with teeth, investigative resources, legal support for victims, advocacy for policy change. We'll make sure what happened to you can't happen to anyone else. We? Lena looked up at him. Obviously, you don't think I'm doing this without you? Ethan pulled her to her feet. You're going to be the face of this, Lena. The living proof that the system failed, but people fought back. Your story is going to change lives. I'm 73 years old. I don't know anything about running foundations or changing policy, but you know what it feels like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to have people make decisions about your life without listening to your voice. Ethan held both her hands. That's the expertise that matters. The rest we can hire. Lena's eyes filled with tears. You really mean this? Every word. We're going to build something that makes sure vulnerable people have advocates, that makes sure families have resources, that makes sure the Vanessas of the world can't prey on people who deserve dignity and respect. When did you get so idealistic? I learned from the best. He pulled her into a hug. Now please try to get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to change everything. This time, Lena didn't argue. She retreated to one of the bedrooms while Ethan claimed the other, though neither of them managed more than fitful rest. Every time Ethan closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the gala guests. Shock, horror, recognition that they'd been complicit in a system they'd never bothered to question. Some of them probably had relatives in facilities right now. Some of them had probably made referrals themselves, never thinking about the human cost. They'd be thinking about it now. At 5:30 in the morning, Ethan gave up on sleep and made coffee. Marcus was still stationed by the door, looking alert despite the all-night vigil. Any updates? Ethan asked, handing him a cup. Torres checked in an hour ago. Teams are in position at all 7 facilities. Search warrants are signed. Arrest warrants ready for 12 key players, including Dr. Pemberton and the owners of the parent company. Marcus pulled up a tactical map on his tablet. It's going to be synchronized down to the minute. 6 a.m., they move on everyone simultaneously. And Vanessa? Will be arrested at her mother's penthouse at 6:15. Torres wanted to give you the satisfaction of knowing you'd be watching it happen in real time. Marcus handed over a secure tablet. This feed will show you everything as it unfolds. Ethan took the tablet with trembling hands. Part of him had hoped it wouldn't come to this, that Vanessa would cooperate, show some remorse, help dismantle the network she'd been part of. But he knew better. People like Vanessa didn't suddenly develop consciences. They fought until they had no options left. Lena emerged from her room at 5:45, looking as sleepless as Ethan felt. Is it starting? In 15 minutes. He pulled up a chair beside her. We don't have to watch if you don't want to. I want to. Her voice was firm. I want to see justice happen. At precisely 6 a.m., the tablet screen split into multiple feeds. Ethan watched federal agents in raid jackets approach 7 different facilities across California. The operations were textbook, controlled, professional, overwhelming force without unnecessary aggression. They entered simultaneously, fanning out through the buildings with practiced efficiency. One feed showed Serenity Heights Marion, the facility Vanessa had planned to send Lena to. Agents moved through the halls, securing staff, beginning to evacuate residents who'd been placed there under questionable circumstances. An elderly man in a wheelchair looked confused as agents explained they were there to help him. A woman who couldn't have been more impaired than someone with normal age-related forgetfulness started crying with relief when told she was going home. Another feed showed Dr. Pemberton being led from his home in handcuffs, still in his bathrobe, his face a mask of indignant shock. His protests were silent on the video, but his body language screamed outrage at being treated like a common criminal. He looked surprised, Lena observed quietly, like he actually believed he'd get away with it. People like him always do. Ethan scrolled through the feeds. They've been operating so long without consequences, they forgot that laws apply to them too. At 6:12, a new feed appeared, the penthouse building where Vanessa's mother lived. Ethan watched 4 agents enter the lobby, exchange words with the doorman, and take the elevator to the top floor. 3 minutes later, they were inside. The camera was body cam footage from one of the agents, showing Vanessa standing in her mother's living room still wearing the silver gown from last night, her makeup smeared from crying or rage or both. Her mother, a brittle woman who'd always looked at Ethan like he wasn't quite good enough for her daughter, stood beside her, equally disheveled. The lead agent's voice came through clearly on the audio. Vanessa Cole, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Vanessa's voice cut through, shrill and desperate. This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here. My husband humiliated me publicly, destroyed my reputation with lies. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I'd suggest you use it. The agent continued reading Miranda rights while another cuffed Vanessa's hands behind her back. She struggled briefly, then seemed to deflate, the reality of her situation finally breaking through whatever delusion had been protecting her. Ethan felt Lena's hand find his, squeezing tight. They watched in silence as Vanessa was led from the penthouse, past cameras that had somehow gotten word of the arrest, into a waiting vehicle. The woman who'd ruled San Francisco society just 24 hours ago now looked small and broken, her perfect facade shattered beyond repair. How do you feel? Lena asked softly. I don't know. Ethan was surprised to find it was true. He'd expected satisfaction, maybe even joy at seeing Vanessa face consequences. Instead, he felt hollow. I'm glad she's being held accountable, but I also just watched my marriage officially end on a federal agent's body camera. You can feel both things. Relief and loss aren't mutually exclusive. I loved her. The admission came out quietly. Or I thought I did. I loved who I thought she was. That's real, even if she wasn't. Lena squeezed his hand. Grieve that loss if you need to, but don't let it make you question what you did. The woman you loved was never real. The cruelty you exposed? That was always who she was. Marcus's phone rang, and he answered with professional efficiency. Understood. We'll stand by. He turned to Ethan. Torres wants to debrief with you in person. She's sending a car in an hour. The FBI field office in San Francisco occupied a nondescript building that could have been any corporate headquarters, if not for the security measures. Torres met them in a conference room filled with evidence boards, each one mapping out connections in the elder abuse network. Mr. Cole, Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming in. Torres looked like she'd been up all night, but energized by the successful operation. I wanted to brief you personally on what we've accomplished this morning. She pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. 12 arrests, including Dr. Pemberton, Vanessa Cole, and the CEO of the parent company that owns all 7 facilities. We've secured financial records dating back 6 years showing systematic fraud totaling over $40 million. And we've identified 63 victims who were placed in these facilities under false pretenses. 63? Lena's voice was small. There are 63 people like me? At minimum, we expect that number to grow as we continue investigating. Torres clicked to the next slide. But here's the good news. We're evacuating everyone who shouldn't be there as we speak, coordinating with family members, arranging proper care, making sure people go home or to legitimate facilities that actually serve their needs. She pulled up photos of reunions happening across the state, elderly people embracing family members they hadn't seen in months or years, tears of joy replacing the resignation that had become their daily reality. This is because of you. Torres looked directly at Ethan and Lena. Your willingness to go public, to risk everything to expose this network. You gave us the leverage we needed to move quickly and decisively. These people are going home because you stood up. What happens to the facilities? Ethan asked. Being shut down pending investigation. Any legitimate residents will be transferred to properly licensed and monitored facilities. The buildings themselves will likely be seized as proceeds of criminal enterprise. Torres pulled up financial documents. We're also pursuing charges against everyone who received referral fees, participated in false evaluations, or knowingly placed people in these facilities for profit. How long will it take to prosecute everyone? Years, probably. Cases this complex take time to build properly, but we're committed to seeing it through. Torres leaned forward. Mr. Cole, I want you to understand something. What you did last night, exposing this publicly before we'd completed our investigation, it was risky. It could have compromised everything. Ethan felt his stomach clench, but it also worked perfectly. The public pressure made it impossible for anyone to run or destroy evidence. The media coverage is ensuring sustained attention on elder care reform. And your foundation, she smiled. The one I hear you're planning to start, that's going to provide ongoing accountability that law enforcement alone can't sustain. You know about the foundation already? I know everything about you, Mr. Cole. It's my job. Torres stood, extending her hand. And I know you're serious about making lasting change. So here's what I'm proposing. A partnership between your foundation and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. You provide investigative resources and public advocacy. We provide legal weight and prosecutorial power. Together, we dismantle these networks nationwide. Ethan shook her hand, feeling pieces clicking into place. When do we start? You already have. Torres pulled out a business card. My direct line. Use it whenever you find something that needs federal attention. And Mr. Cole, she glanced at Lena. Thank you, both of you, for having the courage to fight when it would have been easier to stay quiet. The drive back to the safe house felt different somehow, lighter, despite the weight of everything still ahead. Lena was quiet, staring out at the city as they passed through neighborhoods that probably held dozens of hidden stories like hers. What are you thinking? Ethan asked. I'm thinking about all those people being reunited with their families today. The relief they must feel, the anger too probably, at being taken from their lives, at losing months or years they'll never get back. Lena turned to him. And I'm thinking about how close I came to being one of them permanently. If you hadn't come home early, if you hadn't overheard Vanessa, if you hadn't cared enough to investigate, but I did, and you're not. Ethan took her hand, and now we're going to make sure the system that failed you gets completely rebuilt. That's a big promise. Then we'd better get started. Back at the safe house, Marcus had been coordinating with Kenneth and Rachel, preparing for the next phase. The legal team had filed divorce papers at 9 a.m., citing fraud, abuse, and criminal conspiracy. Vanessa's lawyers had already responded with threats of defamation suits, but Kenneth seemed unconcerned. Let them sue, he said when Ethan called for an update. Every deposition, every piece of evidence they try to challenge, it just puts more of Vanessa's crimes on public record. Her lawyers know it. They're posturing for their client, but they also know she's going to prison. How long? Federal sentencing guidelines for this kind of fraud? 15 to 20 years minimum, especially with the elder abuse enhancements. Dr. Pemberton is looking at similar numbers. The facility owners might cut deals, but the sentences will still be substantial. Kenneth paused. Ethan, You need to prepare yourself for what comes during the trial. Vanessa's lawyers will attack your credibility, question your motives, try to paint you as a vindictive husband using your wealth and power to destroy your wife. Let them try. Everything I've said is documented and true. I know, but the court of public opinion operates on different rules than actual courts. Be prepared for people to take her side, to suggest you're the real villain in this story. I can handle it. And he could. Because every time doubt crept in, every time he wondered if he'd done the right thing, he could look at Lena and remember what Vanessa had tried to do. Not just to one elderly woman, but to dozens, hundreds if the network had continued unchecked. That afternoon, Rachel called with news that CNN wanted to air a full interview. Not just about the gala or the arrests, but about the broader issue of elder care reform. They want both of you, so, Rachel explained, Ethan to discuss the investigation and the foundation, Lena to share her personal story. It would air Monday night, primetime, with a commitment to serious journalism rather than sensationalism. Ethan looked to Lena, who was listening on speaker. What do you think? I think I'm tired of being invisible, Lena's voice was steady. If telling my story helps other people, then that's what I should do. Then we do it. Ethan felt a surge of pride. Set it up, Rachel. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Kenneth's team helped Ethan and Lena prepare for the interview, running through likely questions and coaching them on how to stay on message. Marcus coordinated security, ensuring they could move safely despite the media attention. And Torres kept them updated on the investigation's progress. More arrests, more victims identified, more evidence of systematic fraud. By Sunday evening, the full scope of the network was becoming clear. 7 facilities in California were just the beginning. The parent company had operations in Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon. The total number of victims was approaching 200, and the financial fraud exceeded $70 million. This is going to be one of the largest elder abuse prosecutions in American history, Torres told Ethan during their evening briefing, and it started because one woman showed up at your door asking for help. Monday morning, Ethan and Lena were driven to CNN's San Francisco studio. The interview was scheduled for 2 hours with the understanding that it would be edited down to a 1-hour special. Anderson Cooper would conduct it personally, a sign of how seriously the network was taking the story. In the green room, Lena fidgeted with her outfit, another simple but elegant dress, this time in deep blue. I've never been on television before. Just tell the truth, that's all you need to do. Ethan squeezed her hand. Anderson's good at this. He'll make it feel like a conversation, not an interrogation. What if I cry? What if I can't get through it? Then you cry. There's no shame in showing emotion about something that hurt you. He smiled. Trust me, authenticity is more powerful than polish. When they were called to the set, Ethan was struck by how intimate it felt despite the cameras and crew. 3 chairs arranged in a casual triangle, soft lighting, everything designed to facilitate honest conversation rather than confrontation. Anderson Cooper greeted them warmly, his silver hair and blue eyes somehow both professional and compassionate. Thank you both for doing this. I know it can't be easy. Thank you for taking it seriously, Ethan replied. The interview started gently, with Anderson asking about Ethan's background, his relationship with Lena, what she'd meant to him growing up. Lena shared stories about raising him, the struggles, the joys, the pride she'd felt watching him succeed. Then Anderson shifted to the harder questions. Ms. Brooks, can you walk us through what happened when you went to the Coles home in March? Lena took a breath and told her story. Every painful detail, the basement room, the unpaid labor, the gaslighting about the trust fund, the growing fear that she'd never escape. Her voice cracked several times, but she pushed through, determined to be heard. And during those 3 months, did you ever consider leaving? Anderson asked. Every day, Lena wiped her eyes. But where would I go? I had no money, no transportation, no one who knew where I was. Vanessa had taken my phone, said I didn't need it since I wasn't going anywhere. I was completely isolated. That's a common tactic in abuse situations, isolation and control. Anderson turned to Ethan. When you discovered what was happening, what was your first thought? Rage. Pure, incandescent rage. Ethan didn't try to soften it. The woman who raised me, who gave me everything, was being treated like garbage in my own home. By someone I'd trusted, married, built a life with. The betrayal was... He stopped, composing himself. It was incomprehensible. But you didn't just move Lena out and handle this privately. You chose to go public in a very dramatic way. Why? Because it wasn't just about Lena. Ethan leaned forward, engaged now. Once we started investigating, we found evidence of a network. Facilities across California exploiting vulnerable seniors for profit. Doctors performing cursory evaluations and declaring people incompetent. Social circles trading referrals for kickbacks. This wasn't one person's cruelty. It was systematic abuse enabled by people who should have known better. Including your wife. Including my wife. The words hurt less than Ethan expected. Vanessa was part of a system that treated elderly people as commodities, as problems to be managed rather than human beings deserving dignity and respect. And when I realized the scope of it, I knew I had a responsibility to expose it. Anderson spent the next hour drilling into the details. The investigation, the FBI raids, the arrests, the victims being reunited with families. He asked hard questions about Ethan's wealth and privilege, about whether he could have done more sooner, about what he planned to do moving forward. And Ethan answered honestly, acknowledging his failures while committing to lasting change. The interview wrapped at 1 p.m., and as the cameras stopped rolling, Anderson stood and shook both their hands. That was remarkable. Both of you, your courage, your honesty, it's going to move people. This airs tonight at 9 Eastern. I think you're going to change a lot of minds about elder care in this country. Back at the safe house that evening, Ethan and Lena watched the broadcast together. Seeing himself on screen was strange. He looked harder than he felt, more certain than he'd been in the moment. But Lena looked exactly right. Vulnerable but strong, hurt but hopeful. A living testament to resilience. When it ended, Ethan's phone exploded with messages. Kenneth reporting that Vanessa's lawyers had requested a meeting to discuss plea bargains. Rachel sharing that the interview had trended #1 nationally within minutes. Torres confirming that 3 more states had launched their own investigations into elder care facilities. And dozens of messages from people Ethan barely knew, expressing support, sharing their own stories, asking how they could help. "It's working," Lena said softly. "People are listening. People are angry." Ethan scrolled through the responses. And anger is useful. It drives change. What happens now? Now we build the foundation. We hire investigators and lawyers and advocates. We create a system that supports families and protects vulnerable people. We make sure what happened to you can't happen to anyone else. He turned to her. And we do it together. Partners. Lena smiled through fresh tears. Partners. Outside, San Francisco glittered in the night, a city full of hidden stories and invisible people. But because of what happened in one billionaire's basement, because one woman had the courage to speak and one man had the courage to listen, some of those invisible people were about to become impossible to ignore. The war Ethan had declared on Vanessa had expanded into something bigger than revenge or justice for one person. It had become a movement. And standing beside the woman who'd saved him 30 years ago, Ethan Cole was ready to fight it for as long as it took. Because the measure of a person isn't what they build for themselves. It's what they tear down to protect others, and what they build in its place to make sure it never happens again. The interview changed everything overnight. By Tuesday morning, Ethan's phone had logged over 3,000 messages from people sharing their own experiences with questionable elder care placements. Rachel's office was fielding calls from victims' families, advocacy groups, and state legislators who wanted to know how they could help. The foundation Ethan had imagined as a future project suddenly needed to exist immediately. Kenneth arrived at the safe house at 8 a.m. with documents spread across the dining table before Lena had finished her coffee. "We need to talk about Vanessa's plea offer." Ethan set down his own cup with deliberate care. "She's already looking for deals?" "Her lawyers know the evidence is overwhelming. Federal prosecutors have her on video discussing referral fees, emails coordinating placements, financial records showing she received over $200,000 in consulting payments over 3 years. Kenneth pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. "They're proposing she pleads guilty to reduce charges, cooperates fully with the ongoing investigation, and accepts a sentence of 8 to 10 years. 8 to 10? Ethan felt anger flare hot in his chest. She systematically abused vulnerable people for profit. She tried to have Lena institutionalized and locked away, and they want to give her less than a decade? It's a starting offer. Torres thinks we can push for 15 minimum if we refuse to negotiate. Kenneth looked between Ethan and Lena. But there's a complication. Part of Vanessa's cooperation would include testifying against the facility owners and Dr. Pemberton. Her testimony could be the difference between convicting the entire network or watching some of them walk on technicalities. So we sacrifice justice for Lena to get justice for everyone else? Ethan's voice was hard. No. Lena spoke up from her place at the table. We accept that 8 years in federal prison is still justice. Not perfect justice, maybe, but enough. She met Ethan's eyes. Baby, this was never about revenge. It was about stopping the system. If Vanessa's testimony puts away the people running these facilities, saves future victims, dismantles the whole operation, that's worth more than a few extra years of her sentence. You're being too generous. I'm being strategic. Lena's smile was sad but genuine. You taught me that. Sometimes you take the deal that helps the most people, even if it doesn't feel like enough. Ethan wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. This had stopped being about personal vengeance the moment they'd discovered the network's true scope. The goal wasn't to destroy Vanessa, it was to destroy the system that enabled people like her. Tell Torres we'll consider the plea if Vanessa provides full cooperation and the sentence is 12 years minimum with no parole eligibility before 10. Ethan looked at Kenneth. And I want it on record that any future reduction in sentence requires approval from the victims, including Lena. I'll make it happen. Kenneth made notes. There's something else. The divorce settlement. What about it? Vanessa's lawyers are proposing she surrenders all claims to marital assets in exchange for you covering her legal defense costs. Kenneth's expression made clear what he thought of that proposal. Essentially, she wants you to pay millions for lawyers to minimize her prison time while she gives up money she was going to lose anyway through asset forfeiture. Absolutely not. Ethan didn't need to think about it. She pays for her own lawyers. She surrenders all marital assets because that's what happens when you commit federal crimes during a marriage. And she signs a statement acknowledging the abuse and fraud to be included in the divorce decree. Her lawyers won't agree to that. Then we go to trial, and I air every piece of dirty laundry in open court. Ethan leaned back. Her choice. Easy settlement with an admission of guilt, or public trial where I make sure everyone knows exactly what she is. Kenneth smiled grimly. I'll convey the message. After Kenneth left, Marcus arrived with updates on the foundation. We've got office space donated by 3 different tech companies. A prominent civil rights attorney wants to serve as general counsel pro bono. And I've identified 12 experienced investigators who specialize in elder care fraud who want to join the team. That was fast. Ethan felt overwhelmed by the response. People are motivated. The CNN interview has been viewed 18 million times. Justice. Lena has raised over $2 million in grassroots donations just from people wanting to support the cause. Marcus pulled up social media feeds. You've tapped into something bigger than you realized. People are angry about how society treats the elderly. They're ready to fight. Lena stood at the window, looking out at the bay. $2 million from strangers who don't even know me. They know your story. They recognize themselves in it. Or their parents, their grandparents, people they've lost to a system that didn't care. Ethan joined her at the window. You've become a symbol, Lena, not because you wanted to, but because you survived something a lot of people are afraid of. What if I'm not strong enough for this? What if I let people down? You won't. Ethan's voice was certain. Because you're not doing this alone. We're building a team, hiring experts, creating systems that will outlast both of us. Your job isn't to be perfect, it's to be honest about what happened and why it matters. Over the next 2 weeks, the foundation took shape with startling speed. They hired Patricia Chen from Kenneth's firm as executive director, brought on the investigative team Marcus had identified, and established partnerships with elder advocacy groups across the country. The office space in downtown San Francisco transformed from empty rooms to a fully operational nonprofit almost overnight. Lena insisted on being involved in every decision despite her lack of experience. She interviewed potential staff members, reviewed operational plans, and offered insights that came from lived experience rather than academic theory. The team quickly learned that when Lena spoke about what vulnerable people needed, they should listen. "We need a hotline," she announced during one planning meeting. "A number that people can call 24 hours a day if they suspect abuse or need help, because the crisis doesn't wait for business hours." Patricia made a note. "That's going to be expensive to staff properly." "Then we fundraise for it." Lena's tone left no room for argument. "When I was in that basement, I had no one to call, no one who would listen. We're making sure everyone has someone." The hotline launched 3 weeks after the CNN interview, staffed by trained counselors and connected directly to legal resources. Within 48 hours, they'd received over 500 calls. Some were people sharing stories, but many were active situations. Elderly people trapped in facilities they didn't belong in, families being pressured into placements, abuse happening in real time. Each call was documented, investigated, and when warranted, reported to appropriate authorities. The foundation became a clearinghouse for elder abuse allegations across California, then across the western states, then nationwide as word spread. Torres kept Ethan updated on the federal prosecution. Vanessa had accepted the 12-year plea deal and was cooperating fully. Her testimony had already led to additional arrests, including 2 state legislators who'd received campaign contributions in exchange for killing oversight legislation. Dr. Pemberton had refused to cooperate and was going to trial facing 25 years. "Your wife is being very helpful," Torres said during one briefing call. "Almost too helpful. I think she's realized the full scope of what she was part of, and it's shaken her." "Good." Ethan felt no sympathy. "She should be shaken." She's also asked several times if she can speak with Ms. Brooks. "Apologize personally." Torres paused. "Obviously, we've denied those requests, but I wanted you to know." Ethan glanced at Lena, who was working at her desk across the foundation office. She'd heard the comment and shook her head firmly. "Lena doesn't want to hear from her. Neither do I." Ethan's voice was final. "Vanessa made her choices. Now she lives with the consequences." 2 months after the gala, the divorce was finalized. Vanessa surrendered all claims to marital property, signed a statement acknowledging her abuse and fraud, and agreed to a lifetime restraining order preventing any contact with Ethan or Lena. In exchange, Ethan didn't contest her plea agreement or speak publicly about additional allegations that had emerged during the investigation. Kenneth delivered the final papers to the foundation office on a Friday afternoon. "It's done. You're officially divorced, and everything she tried to take is back under your control." Ethan signed the documents feeling nothing but relief. No sadness, no regret, just the satisfaction of closing a painful chapter. "How much are we talking about in recovered assets?" "Approximately $47 million once we account for the properties, investments, and funds she transferred to her name." Kenneth smiled. "I'm assuming you have plans for that money." "All of it goes to the foundation." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Vanessa built that fortune on the backs of vulnerable people. It's only right that it goes to protecting them." The donation made national news. A billionaire giving his entire divorce settlement to the foundation he'd created to fight elder abuse was the kind of story that resonated across partisan lines. Donations poured in from across the country. More states launched investigations. Congress scheduled hearings on elder care reform. And through it all, Lena stood at the center, not as a victim anymore, but as an advocate. She testified before state legislatures, gave interviews to major media outlets, and met with families who'd lost loved ones to the system. Her story gave them hope. Her survival gave them courage. 6 months after the gala, Ethan stood in the foundation's conference room watching Lena address a group of families who'd been affected by the Serenity Heights network. She spoke without notes, her voice steady and strong. "I know what it's like to feel invisible," she told them. "To have people make decisions about your life without listening to your voice. To be treated like a problem instead of a person." She paused, making eye contact around the room. "But I also know what it's like to fight back, to find your voice, to stand up and say, 'I matter, and I deserve dignity.'" The room was silent, hanging on her every word. The system failed us, all of us. But we're building something better, not just this foundation, but a movement. A recognition that how we treat our elderly says everything about who we are as a society. Lena's voice grew stronger. And we're not going to be silent anymore. We're not going to be invisible. We're going to fight for every person who can't fight for themselves. And we're going to win. The room erupted in applause. Ethan felt his throat tighten with pride. This was the woman who'd raised him. Fierce, compassionate, unbreakable. She'd been beaten down by circumstance and cruelty, but she hadn't stayed down. She'd risen, and in rising, she'd lifted countless others with her. After the families left, Ethan found Lena in her office, staring at a wall covered with photos of people the foundation had helped. Elderly people reunited with families. Facilities shut down. Legislation passed. Lives changed. "You did this," he said quietly. "We did this," Lena corrected. "Together. I just provided resources. You provided the heart. And you provided the courage to act when it would have been easier to stay quiet." She turned to face him. "Do you remember what you asked me that first night in the safe house? You asked how I felt about what was happening." "I remember. I didn't have a good answer then, but I do now." Lena smiled, and it reached her eyes for the first time in months. "I feel powerful, not because of money or status, but because I took something terrible and turned it into something meaningful." Vanessa tried to erase me. Instead, she gave me a platform to help thousands of people. That's not justice in the legal sense. That's justice in the cosmic sense. She's going to prison for 12 years, and I'm going to spend those 12 years making sure the system that enabled her can't hurt anyone else. Lena squeezed his hand. That's better than any sentence a judge could hand down. The trial of Dr. Pemberton and the facility owners began in September. Ethan and Lena attended every day of testimony, sitting in the gallery with other victims and their families. Vanessa testified for 3 days, her voice flat and mechanical, as she detailed the referral network, the kickback scheme, the deliberate exploitation of vulnerable people. She never looked at Ethan or Lena. Not once. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Dr. Pemberton received 22 years. The facility owners got sentences ranging from 15 to 18 years, and dozens of co-conspirators accepted plea deals that would keep them in prison for years. Outside the courthouse, reporters pressed close with microphones and cameras. Ethan made a brief statement thanking the prosecution team and the FBI, but it was Lena who delivered the message that would be replayed on every news broadcast that evening. "Today, justice was served," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the crisp autumn air. "Not just for me, but for the 217 people we know were victimized by this network, and for the countless others we haven't found yet." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "But trials end. Sentences are served. The real work is making sure this never happens again. That's what the foundation is committed to. That's what I'm committed to, for as long as it takes." A reporter called out, "Ms. Brooks, do you have any message for Vanessa Cole?" Lena considered this. "I hope she uses her time in prison to think about the lives she destroyed. I hope she finds some kind of peace with what she's done. But mostly, I hope she understands that she didn't win. She tried to make me invisible, and instead she made me impossible to ignore. That's not revenge. That's transformation." That night, Ethan and Lena had dinner at a quiet restaurant in the Marina District, celebrating in their own way. No press, no cameras, just the two of them, and a bottle of wine that cost less than Vanessa would have spent on a single flower arrangement. "What do you want to do tomorrow?" Ethan asked as they walked along the waterfront afterward, the Golden Gate Bridge glowing in the distance. "I have meetings with 3 senators about federal oversight legislation, then a site visit to a facility in Sacramento that's been flagged by our investigators, then an interview with NPR about the Foundation's first-year impact report." Lena laughed. "I'm busier now than when I was working 2 jobs. You could delegate more, hire people to handle some of that." "I could, but I don't want to." She stopped, looking out at the water. "For 3 months, I was powerless. Unable to help myself, unable to reach you, unable to change my situation. Now I have power, not money or status, but the ability to make things happen, to help people. I'm not ready to give that up. I'm not asking you to give it up, just share the load. Says the man who works 80 hours a week on the foundation while running a billion-dollar company. Lena gave him a pointed look. We're both workaholics, baby. Let's just own it. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Two people who'd survived something terrible and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. Do you ever think about her? Lena asked finally. About Vanessa? Sometimes, Ethan admitted. I wonder how I missed it. How someone could be that cruel and I just didn't see it. Because you're not cruel. You don't think like she does. Lena linked her arm through his. You trusted your partner to share your values. That's not a character flaw. That's humanity. She exploited it, but that doesn't mean you were wrong to have it. I should have known. Maybe. Or maybe she was just that good at hiding who she was. Lena squeezed his arm. Either way, it's done now. She's in prison. The network is destroyed. The foundation is helping people. We won, Ethan. We actually won. 1 year after the gala, the foundation held its first annual fundraiser. Not a glittering society event like Vanessa would have organized, but a community gathering in Golden Gate Park with food trucks, live music, and families who'd been helped by the organization. Over 5,000 people attended, including many of the 217 victims identified in the federal case. Ethan stood on a small stage looking out at the crowd and felt something he hadn't experienced in his years of building tech companies, pure, uncomplicated satisfaction. A year ago, I stood on a stage and exposed a system that was destroying lives, he began. Today, I'm standing on a stage celebrating a community that's rebuilding those lives. That's transformation. He detailed the foundation's accomplishments. Over 3,000 investigations completed, 47 facilities shut down or reformed, 12 state laws passed strengthening elder care oversight, a national hotline that had handled over 15,000 calls, and most importantly, countless individuals helped, protected, given voices when the system tried to silence them. But none of this would exist without the woman who showed up at my door asking for help. Ethan gestured to Lena, who stood beside him looking slightly uncomfortable with the attention. Lena Brooks didn't just survive abuse, she transformed it into advocacy. She turned personal trauma into systemic change. And she reminds us every day that the measure of our humanity is how we treat the most vulnerable among us. The crowd erupted in applause. Lena wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by the response. When Ethan handed her the microphone, she took a moment to compose herself before speaking. I'm not special, she said finally. I'm not particularly brave or strong or exceptional. I'm just someone who refused to stay silent when I could have disappeared. And if my story helped anyone else find their voice, then everything that happened, all the pain, all the fear, it was worth it. She looked at Ethan, her eyes full of love and pride. This man right here, he's the one who's special. He could have handled this quietly, protected his reputation, minimized the scandal, made the problem go away without anyone knowing. Instead, he chose the hard path, the public path, the path that cost him his marriage, his privacy, and probably cost his company billions in valuation. Ethan shook his head, but Lena continued. He chose that path because I taught him something when he was young, that doing the right thing matters more than doing the comfortable thing. And then he taught me that same lesson all over again when I needed it most. That's what family does. We save each other. The tears were flowing freely now, from Lena, from Ethan, from people in the crowd who understood what it meant to be saved by someone who refused to look away. So thank you, Lena said to the crowd. Thank you for supporting this foundation. Thank you for demanding better from our elder care system. Thank you for remembering that invisible people are still people. And thank you for proving that sometimes the good guys actually win. Later that evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the park had returned to its usual calm, Ethan and Lena sat on a bench watching the sun set over the Pacific. I have something for you, Ethan said, pulling out an envelope. Inside were documents transferring ownership of a house in Pacific Heights, not the mansion he'd shared with Vanessa, but a beautiful Victorian he'd purchased and renovated specifically for Lena. 3 bedrooms, a garden, handicap accessible, and close enough to the foundation office that she could walk to work. Ethan, I can't accept this. Lena stared at the papers. It's too much. It's not nearly enough. But it's yours, free and clear, no strings attached. He smiled. You need a home, Lena, a real home. Not a guest suite, not temporary housing, a place that's yours. What about you? Where are you living? I bought a loft in Soma, smaller, simpler, closer to my company headquarters. Ethan shrugged. Turns out I don't need a mansion. I just need a place to sleep between working at the foundation and running my business. Lena folded the papers carefully, tucking them into her purse. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me take you to see it tomorrow. Say you'll make it a home. Ethan took her hand. Say you'll stay in San Francisco so I can have Sunday dinners with you and know you're safe and happy. I can do that. Lena smiled through tears. I can definitely do that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere across the city, Vanessa was in a federal prison, beginning year 2 of a 12-year sentence. The mansion they'd shared had been sold, with proceeds going to the foundation. The society friends who'd enabled her had scattered, their reputations tarnished by association. And here, in a park full of people who'd chosen to fight rather than accept injustice, 2 people who'd saved each other were building something that would outlast them both. 5 years later, the foundation had expanded to all 50 states, with satellite offices in 12 cities and a staff of over 200 people. They'd helped thousands of families, shut down hundreds of problematic facilities, and fundamentally changed how America approached elder care oversight. Lena, at 78, still served as the public face of the organization, though she'd finally agreed to reduce her schedule to something resembling reasonable. She'd published a memoir that became a bestseller and inspired a documentary. She'd testified before Congress 3 times. And she'd become something she never imagined, a national advocate whose voice carried weight in policy discussions across the country. Ethan had stepped back from his tech company to focus full-time on the foundation, using his business expertise to build sustainable systems and his wealth to ensure they had resources to continue the work indefinitely. The foundation had an endowment of over $300 million now, ensuring it would survive long after both he and Lena were gone. On a crisp November morning, Ethan visited Lena at her Pacific Heights home, finding her in the garden she'd cultivated over the years. She was teaching a group of neighborhood children about planting bulbs for spring, her patience and warmth evident in every interaction. The secret is to plant them deep enough that they're protected through winter, she explained to a 6-year-old girl. That way, when spring comes, they have strong roots and they bloom beautifully. Ethan watched from the doorway, struck by the metaphor. Lena had been planted deep in darkness, forced into cold isolation, but she'd developed strong roots, of character, of purpose, of resilience. And when spring came, when she was finally brought back into the light, she'd bloomed in ways no one could have predicted. After the children left, Lena found him sitting on her porch swing. You look contemplative. I was just thinking about how far we've come. Ethan gestured to encompass not just the house, but everything they'd built. 5 years ago, I was married to someone who tried to have you erased. Now you're one of the most recognized advocates in the country. And you're one of the most respected philanthropists. Lena settled beside him on the swing. We make a good team. The best. They rocked gently, watching the San Francisco fog roll in over the hills. Somewhere in a federal prison, Vanessa Cole was serving the remainder of her sentence. She'd be eligible for parole in 5 more years, though early reports suggested she'd struggle to find any support for release. Ethan didn't think about her much anymore. She'd become a footnote in a larger story, the cautionary tale that launched a movement, important for what she represented, but no longer central to his life. What was central sat beside him on this porch swing, the woman who'd saved a 7-year-old boy and never stopped saving him, in one way or another, for the next 40 years. I love you, Lena. Ethan said it simply, without ceremony. I don't say it enough. You say it every day. Lena patted his hand. Every time you show up to work at the foundation, every time you fight for someone who can't fight for themselves, every time you choose the hard right over the easy wrong. That's love in action, baby. The words are just decoration. Still, I love you. I love you too. She leaned her head on his shoulder. My beautiful boy who grew up to change the world. I didn't change the world. I just tried to make one small corner of it better. That's how worlds change. One corner at a time. One person at a time. One act of courage at a time. Lena closed her eyes, content. And look what we built from that one act. Look how many lives are better because you came home early from Singapore and heard something you weren't supposed to hear. You think it was fate? I think it was love. Lena's voice was soft but certain. Love that made you listen. Love that made you act. Love that made you burn down your entire life rather than let someone hurt me. That's not fate. That's choice. The same choice you make every day when you wake up and decide to keep fighting. They sat together as afternoon faded into evening. Two people who'd survived cruelty and chosen compassion, who'd faced injustice and demanded accountability, who'd been given every reason to become bitter and instead became better. The foundation would continue its work long after they were gone. The systems they'd changed would protect people for generations. The voices they'd amplified would echo through policy and practice for decades. But in this moment, on this porch swing, in this garden Lena had planted with her own hands, none of that mattered as much as the simple truth they both understood. Family isn't who raises you. It's who refuses to abandon you, who sees your worth when the world says you're worthless, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. Lena had been that for Ethan when he was 7 years old and alone. And Ethan had been that for Lena when she was 73 and invisible. That wasn't the end of their story. It was the foundation of everything that came after. A foundation built on love, dignity, and the revolutionary idea that every person matters, regardless of age, circumstance, or the opinions of those who consider themselves superior. Vanessa Cole had tried to teach Ethan that some people were disposable. Instead, Lena Brooks had taught him that everyone deserves to be seen. And in learning that lesson, in fighting for that principle, Ethan Cole had helped thousands of people reclaim their voices, their dignity, their lives. That was justice. That was transformation. That was love. And it started with one simple choice: to listen when someone asked for help, even when it would have been easier to look away. Everything else followed from that. Everything.